Hi everyone, welcome to the Red Umbrella channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today we'll be looking at 2 hours of disturbing Simpsons theories to fall asleep to. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough. Let's begin. First up, we've got the theory that Homer has actually been in a coma since 1993. There exists a fan theory about The Simpsons that fundamentally changes how you watch every episode that aired after 1993. The theory suggests Homer Simpson has been in a coma for over 3 decades, and every adventure, every celebrity cameo, every impossible scenario you have watched since season 4 is actually happening inside his dying mind. This theory gained enough traction that major entertainment websites have covered it, Reddit communities dissect it regularly, and even the French-language Wikipedia article for the episode in question dedicates an entire section to exploring this exact possibility. The theory centers on a specific episode from season 4 called So It's Come to This, a Simpsons clip show, which aired on April 1st, 1993. In this episode, Bart pranks Homer on April Fool's Day by putting a can of Duff beer in a paint shaker at the hardware store. When Homer opens the can, it explodes with such force that he ends up hospitalized in a coma. The family gathers around his bedside. Bart feels guilty for nearly killing his father, and Homer remains unconscious, while the episode plays clips from previous seasons. Eventually, Homer wakes up, strangles Bart for the prank, and life continues as normal. But according to this theory, Homer never actually woke up. Everything that followed was a fantasy constructed by his unconscious mind. What makes this theory more than random speculation is the canonical evidence that supports it. About 6 months before Homer falls into his coma, there is an episode called Homer the Heretic, where Homer decides to skip church and create his own religion. During a dream sequence in that episode, Homer meets God himself. They have a conversation, and God tells Homer something very specific. God says he will reveal the meaning of life to Homer in exactly 6 months. This seems like a throwaway joke at the time, just another surreal moment in a show full of them. But when you measure the real-world time between when Homer the Heretic aired and when So It's Come to This aired, the gap is approximately 6 months. The meaning of life God promised to reveal coincides almost perfectly with the moment Homer slips into his coma. The timing creates an unsettling implication. If God told Homer he would learn the meaning of life in 6 months, and 6 months later, Homer falls into a permanent vegetative state, then perhaps the meaning of life God wanted to show him was death itself. Or maybe the meaning was that life is whatever your mind creates when your body fails you. The coma becomes the revelation, and everything Homer experiences afterward becomes his brain trying to make sense of its own shutdown. Before the coma, The Simpsons operated within certain boundaries of reality. The show was always a cartoon with exaggerated situations, but there was an internal logic to Springfield. Characters aged slowly, consequences existed, and while plots could be absurd, they remained somewhat grounded in a recognizable version of American suburban life. The first 4 seasons established Springfield as a place that felt real despite being animated. You could believe a nuclear safety inspector might actually live this life, have these neighbors, deal with these problems. After Homer wakes from his coma in that April 1993 episode, something shifts in the show. The boundaries that existed before start to dissolve. Characters stop aging entirely. Bart has been 10 years old for over 30 years. Lisa remains 8. Maggie never speaks her first word, despite decades passing in our world. The floating timeline becomes more pronounced, with episodes referencing current events and technology while the characters remain frozen at the exact ages they were when Homer fell into his coma. In a real Springfield, Bart would be over 40 years old by now, but in Homer's coma dream, everyone stays exactly as he remembers them because his damaged brain cannot imagine them any other way. The plots themselves become increasingly disconnected from reality. Homer goes to space. The family travels to Japan, Australia, Africa, Brazil, England, and dozens of other countries with no explanation of how they afford these trips on a nuclear safety inspector's salary. Homer becomes an astronaut, a musician, a boxer, a food critic, a snowplow driver, a bodyguard for celebrities, a missionary, a hippie, a arms dealer, and hundreds of other professions. Each episode resets him back to his job at the power plant as if the previous adventure never happened. Characters die and come back. Impossible events occur and are never mentioned again. The show becomes a carousel of disconnected scenarios that share characters but have no continuity. Celebrity cameos become more frequent and more bizarre after the coma. In the early seasons, celebrity appearances were rare and usually made sense within the plot. After season 4, celebrities start appearing constantly, often playing themselves in scenarios that make no logical sense. Homer meets multiple presidents. He becomes friends with famous musicians. He encounters movie stars, athletes, and historical figures with increasing frequency. In a coma dream, this makes perfect sense. Homer's brain pulls from his memories of watching television and reading magazines, inserting famous faces into his fantasy life because his subconscious is running out of original material. The celebrities are fragments of pop culture his dying neurons are desperately trying to arrange into coherent stories. The town of Springfield itself becomes less consistent. Buildings appear and disappear between episodes. The geography changes constantly. Entire locations are introduced and then forgotten. Characters are added to the cast with no explanation of where they came from or why nobody mentioned them before. Longtime residents suddenly have completely different personalities or backstories. The world Homer experiences lacks the stability of reality because his brain cannot maintain a consistent simulation. Like a dream that changes details every time you look away, Springfield morphs to fit whatever story Homer's subconscious decides to tell that week. Homer's own personality becomes exaggerated beyond recognition. In the early seasons, Homer was foolish and lazy but had moments of genuine intelligence and depth. He loved his family. He struggled with real problems. He had emotions that felt authentic, even in comedic situations. After the coma, Homer becomes increasingly stupid, selfish, and cruel. He strangles Bart more frequently. He ignores Marge's feelings. He endangers his family repeatedly. He becomes a cartoon of himself, literally and figuratively. This degradation mirrors what might happen in a coma patient's mind as brain damage progresses. The Homer in the coma cannot remember how to be the full version of himself anymore, so he becomes a simplified, extreme version based on his most basic characteristics. The show also becomes more self-aware after the coma episode. Characters occasionally break the fourth wall. References to being in a television show become more common. The episodes themselves start commenting on their own absurdity. In one episode, Comic Book Guy criticizes a plot as being too far-fetched, and the show acknowledges its own impossibility. In another, characters directly address how they never age. This meta-awareness could be Homer's damaged mind trying to make sense of the illogical patterns it is creating. The coma patient somewhere underneath the fantasy knows something is wrong, knows the world he is experiencing cannot be real, and that knowledge occasionally breaks through in moments of self-referential humor. Family dynamics remain frozen in amber. Homer and Marge never divorce despite enormous problems in their marriage. Bart and Lisa never grow beyond their sibling rivalry. Maggie never develops past infancy. The relationships cannot evolve because they exist only in Homer's memory of how things were when he fell into the coma. His brain is replaying variations of family interactions he remembers, but it cannot imagine true change or growth because he is not experiencing real time anymore. The family in his coma dream is a photograph that occasionally rearranges itself but never truly changes. Major traumatic events happen to the characters but leave no lasting impact. Homer nearly dies dozens of times. The family faces bankruptcy, homelessness, disease, and disaster repeatedly. Yet every episode resets to the same baseline. The house is always the same. The family dynamics return to normal. Nobody learns anything or grows from their experiences. This lack of consequences makes sense in a coma dream, where the brain is just cycling through scenarios without the ability to build on previous events. Each episode is a separate fantasy with no connection to the others because Homer's damaged mind cannot maintain narrative continuity across his unconscious fantasies. The disturbing aspect of this theory goes beyond just explaining plot inconsistencies. It reframes the entire show as a tragedy. Somewhere in a hospital, a man has been unconscious for over 3 decades. His family aged and moved on with their lives while he remained frozen in time. Everything viewers have enjoyed for 30 years has been the mental activity of a dying brain, desperately trying to entertain itself with fragments of memories and pop culture. Every joke is a neuron firing in a damaged mind. Every adventure is a synaptic pattern trying to simulate normalcy. Every celebrity cameo is a magazine cover Homer saw once being recycled by a brain that is slowly forgetting how to be a person. The theory also suggests that the show, growing more surreal and disconnected over the years, mirrors the progression of brain death. As real time passes and Homer's body remains in a coma, his brain deteriorates further. The early seasons after his coma still maintained some logic because the damage was fresh and his mind could still construct somewhat coherent narratives. As years turned into decades, the brain damage worsened. The plots became more absurd. The characters became more exaggerated. the world became less consistent. The show becoming worse in later seasons corresponds directly with Homer's brain losing its ability to maintain the fantasy. Eventually, the theory suggests the show will end when Homer's brain finally gives up entirely and he dies in his hospital bed. Medical science supports the possibility that a coma patient might experience elaborate fantasies. The brain remains active during comas. Patients sometimes report vivid dreams or hallucinations. Some describe experiencing entire lifetimes in what was actually just weeks or months of unconsciousness. The idea that Homer could be mentally living through decades of adventures while his body remains motionless is not scientifically impossible. His brain could be running through every possible variation of his life, exploring paths he never took, imagining futures that will never happen, all while the real Springfield moved on without him. The French Wikipedia article for So It's Come to This episode includes a dedicated section analyzing this exact theory, which shows how seriously some fans take the canonical evidence. The article specifically mentions the 6-month gap between God's promise in Homer the Heretic and the coma in So It's Come to This as the foundation of the theory. It discusses how the increasingly surreal plots and non-aging characters after that point support the idea that everything is happening in Homer's mind. The fact that an encyclopedia article treats this theory as worthy of documentation suggests it has moved beyond random internet speculation into something that genuinely changes how people interpret the show. Online communities have spent years analyzing episodes through this lens, finding more evidence in every season. They point out how often Homer dreams within the show, suggesting dreams within the coma dream, like layers of unconsciousness stacking on top of each other. They notice how frequently episodes end with Homer waking up, implying that even within his coma, he experiences multiple levels of awareness. They catalog every moment where reality breaks down or characters acknowledge the impossibility of their situations as moments when the coma patient's mind briefly recognizes its own fantasy. What makes this theory particularly effective is that it cannot be disproven. The show's creators could explicitly state it as false, but the canonical evidence remains. God did promise to reveal the meaning of life in 6 months. Homer did fall into a coma about 6 months later in real time. The show did become more surreal and less consistent after that point. Characters did stop aging. These are facts that exist in the episodes regardless of authorial intent. The theory takes actual canonical moments and arranges them into a narrative that explains every inconsistency and absurdity that followed. The emotional weight of the theory comes from how it transforms comfort food television into existential horror. People watch The Simpsons to relax, to laugh, to revisit characters they love. But if those characters exist only in the dying hallucinations of a man who has been unconscious since 1993, then every warm moment becomes sad. Every joke becomes the desperate attempt of a damaged mind to feel joy. Every family hug is Homer's brain trying to remember what love felt like before the beer can exploded and took his consciousness away. The show becomes a countdown to brain death disguised as animated comedy, with each increasingly absurd season representing another stage of neurological decline. The theory spreads because it makes people reconsider everything they thought they knew about a show they have watched for their entire lives. It takes something familiar and reveals a hidden layer of darkness underneath. It provides an explanation for why the show changed, why it feels different now than it did in the early seasons, why nothing matters and nothing changes despite decades of episodes. The coma theory gives meaning to the meaninglessness by suggesting that the lack of continuity and consequence is the point. Homer is dying slowly in a hospital bed, and we have been watching his mind disintegrate in real time for over 30 years, mistaking brain damage for entertainment. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the theory that Homer actually died from the fugu fish, and everything afterward takes place in purgatory. There exists another interpretation of The Simpsons that suggests the show has been depicting the afterlife since season 2. According to this theory, Homer Simpson died in 1991 from eating poisonous blowfish at a Japanese restaurant, and every episode that aired after represents his experience in a personalized purgatory. The theory centers on a specific moment in the episode, One Fish, Two Fish, Blowfish, Bluefish, where Homer falls asleep believing he has minutes left to live. The screen fades to black, and when we see him again the next morning, he appears to wake up alive. That fade to black fans to argue was the actual moment of death, and his waking up was the beginning of his afterlife. The episode itself provides the canonical foundation for this theory. Homer takes his family to a new sushi restaurant in Springfield called The Happy Sumo. He wants to appear cultured and adventurous, so he orders fugu, which is blowfish prepared in a specific way that removes the deadly poison from the meat. The chef who usually prepares fugu is not available that night, but another chef named Toshiro insists he can handle it despite having no training. Homer eats the fugu and enjoys it. Later that evening, after the family returns home, the phone rings. The master chef from the restaurant calls to tell Homer that Toshiro prepared his fugu incorrectly and that Homer has likely consumed a lethal dose of poison. Homer and Marge rush to the hospital where Dr. Hibbert examines him and delivers devastating news. Homer has between 22 and 24 hours to live. There is no antidote, no treatment, no way to remove the poison from his system. Dr. Hibbert gives Homer a pamphlet that outlines what he should expect as the poison takes effect. The symptoms include numbness in the extremities, dizziness, nausea, and eventually complete paralysis followed by death. Homer will be awake and aware until the final moments when his heart and lungs stop working. Dr. Hibbert suggests Homer use his remaining time to say goodbye to his loved ones and make peace with his life. Homer returns home and creates a list of everything he wants to do before he dies. The list includes making amends with his father, having a meaningful conversation with Bart about manhood, sharing a special moment with Lisa, being intimate with Marge one final time, and listening to the entire Bible on audio tape. The episode follows Homer through his final day as he checks items off his list. Some moments go well, like his heartfelt conversation with Lisa, where they share their feelings. Other moments fail miserably, like his attempt to bond with Bart, that ends with the boy running away in fear because Homer approached the conversation so awkwardly. As the hours count down, Homer becomes increasingly desperate to complete his list. He gets into a physical fight with some men who insult him at a bar, wasting precious time. He struggles to reconnect with his father in a meaningful way. He tries to listen to the entire Bible on tape, but realizes he does not have enough time remaining. Eventually, exhausted and accepting his fate, Homer sits down in his armchair after midnight. He puts on the Bible tape, says a quiet goodbye to his sleeping family, and closes his eyes. The camera slowly pulls away from him as Larry King's voice narrates the book of Exodus. The screen fades to black. When the scene returns, sunlight is streaming through the window. Homer is still in the chair, his eyes open. He realizes he is alive. He checks his body for the symptoms Dr. Hibbert warned him about and finds none. He survived. The poison either was not lethal or the diagnosis was wrong. Homer celebrates, wakes up his family, and life continues as normal. The episode ends with Homer promising to live every day to the fullest, though the final shot shows him immediately reverting to his usual lazy behavior. On the surface, this appears to be a happy ending, where Homer got a second chance at life. The theory suggests that the fade to black was the actual moment of death. When Homer closes his eyes in that chair listening to the Bible tape, his heart stops. The poison completes its work. Homer Simpson dies. But instead of moving on to a traditional heaven or hell, Homer enters a personalized purgatory that looks exactly like his life in Springfield. His consciousness continues in a realm designed specifically for him, populated by everyone he knew, allowing him to keep experiencing a version of existence that feels familiar and real. When he opens his eyes the next morning, he is not waking up in his living room. He is beginning his afterlife without realizing he has crossed over. Purgatory in religious tradition is a state of purification where souls work through their sins before moving on to heaven. It exists outside of normal time and space. The experience is tailored to each individual soul based on what they need to confront before achieving salvation. If The Simpsons after Season 2 represents Homer's purgatory, then the show becomes an extended meditation on his character flaws, his failures as a father and husband, and his struggle to become a better person. Every episode where Homer learns a lesson, only to forget it by the next episode, makes sense in this context. Purgatory forces him to confront the same moral challenges repeatedly until he truly internalizes the lessons. Before the Fugu episode, The Simpsons depicted a version of reality that felt grounded despite being a cartoon. Homer had a job, a mortgage, a family with real problems, the first two. Seasons established Springfield as a place with consequences and continuity. Characters remembered events from previous episodes. Actions had lasting impacts. The world operated according to recognizable rules even when exaggerated for comedy. Homer was flawed but fundamentally decent, a man trying his best to provide for his family despite his limitations. After Homer's near-death experience in the Fugu episode, subtle changes begin appearing in the show. The timeline becomes fluid. Characters stop aging. Impossible events occur with increasing frequency. Homer's personality becomes more exaggerated and less consistent. The town of Springfield itself transforms into something less real and more dreamlike. These changes accelerate as seasons progress, but they begin immediately after the episode where Homer believes he is going to die. The shift from a grounded sitcom to a surreal cartoon happens right at the moment when, according to this theory, Homer transitions from life to afterlife. In a traditional afterlife, time works differently than it does for the living. Spirits exist in an eternal present where years can pass in moments or moments can stretch into years. The Simpsons demonstrates this exact quality. The characters never age despite decades passing in the real world. Bart has been 10 years old since 1991. Lisa remains 8. Maggie never grows beyond infancy. If the show takes place in Homer's purgatory, then this frozen timeline makes perfect sense. Homer exists outside of linear time now. His children will always be the ages they were when he died because his afterlife is built from his memories of them at that moment. He cannot imagine them older because he will never see them grow up in reality. The nature of the adventures Homer experiences after the Fugu episode also supports the purgatory theory. Homer becomes an astronaut, travels the world, meets countless celebrities, starts new businesses, and lives through scenarios that would be impossible for a real nuclear safety inspector in a small American town. In life, Homer was stuck in a dead-end job with limited prospects. In purgatory, his consciousness can explore every possibility he ever dreamed of. The afterlife gives him the adventures he never had when alive, allowing him to experience alternate versions of his life where he achieved his fantasies. Each episode becomes a different path Homer might have taken if circumstances had been different. The show also repeatedly features episodes where Homer actually dies or nearly dies, which creates a strange pattern. Homer goes to heaven and hell in multiple episodes. He makes deals with the devil. He meets God personally several times. Angels and demons appear regularly in Springfield. If Homer already died in season 2, then these supernatural encounters make more sense. He exists in a spiritual realm now, so brushing up against other aspects of the afterlife happens naturally. The boundaries between life and death, heaven and hell, reality and fantasy dissolve because Homer is already operating in a space where those boundaries are meaningless. Family relationships in the show take on a tragic quality when viewed through this lens. Every time Homer hugs his children or kisses Marge, he is interacting with constructs in his purgatory rather than the real people. The actual Bart, Lisa, and Maggie continued living their lives after Homer died. They grew up, went to college, got married, had their own children. Meanwhile, Homer remains trapped in a version of Springfield where they stay frozen as children forever. His purgatory shows him what he lost by dying so young. He gets to be a father, but only to echoes of his children as they were when he left them. He cannot watch them grow because he is no longer part of their real timeline. Marge becomes an especially heartbreaking figure in this interpretation. In the real world, she became a widow at a young age. She raised 3 children alone. She eventually moved on with her life, perhaps remarried, certainly aged and changed in ways Homer will never see. But in his purgatory, Marge remains exactly as he remembered her. She still loves him. She still tolerates his failures. She never leaves despite having every reason to do so. Homer's afterlife gives him a version of Marge who will always be there. But this Marge is a memory made manifest rather than the real woman who survived him and built a life beyond their marriage. The emotional goodbye sequence in the Fugu episode becomes retroactively real under this theory. When Homer tells Lisa he loves her and tries to connect with Bart one final time, those are genuinely his last moments with his real children. The awkwardness and imperfection of those goodbyes gains weight when you realize Homer never got another chance to improve them. He died with those flawed final conversations as his last interactions with his kids. Everything that comes after in the show represents his regret over those failures, playing out scenarios where he can be a better father, trying endlessly to get it right in his purgatory, even though the real opportunity has passed. Homer's character arc across 30-plus seasons makes more sense as a purgatorial journey. He learns the same lessons repeatedly. He promises to change and then reverts to his worst behaviors. He confronts his selfishness, his drinking, his poor parenting, his neglect of Marge over and over across hundreds of episodes. In a normal life, this repetition would be frustrating character regression. In purgatory, it represents a soul struggling to overcome its fundamental flaws. Homer keeps getting chances to be better because his afterlife is designed to purify him through repeated moral tests. He fails most of them, which is why he remains stuck in Springfield instead of moving on to whatever comes after purgatory. The show becoming more self-aware and meta over time also fits this interpretation. Characters occasionally acknowledge they are in a television show or that their world operates on cartoon logic rather than reality. These moments of awareness could represent Homer's consciousness, recognizing that his purgatory is a construct. Somewhere deep in his spiritual existence, he knows Springfield is not real, that his family are projections, that the adventures are impossible. But he cannot fully accept this truth because accepting it would mean confronting the reality of his death and his separation from the people he loves. Online communities have discussed this theory for years, often comparing it to the coma theory but arguing it works better chronologically. The Fugu episode happens much earlier in the show's run than the coma episode, which means more of the series falls under the theory's explanation. Reddit threads dissect the fade to black moment, analyzing the specific choice to cut away from Homer in the chair and return to him the next morning rather than showing a continuous scene. That editing decision creates the space where death could have occurred without viewers realizing it. The absence of footage showing Homer surviving the night becomes evidence that he did not survive. Entertainment websites covering Simpsons fan theories regularly include the Fugu death theory alongside the coma theory. Screen Rant and Mental Floss articles about the show's darkest fan interpretations discuss how the purgatory reading reframes the entire series. The theory has enough canonical support that it cannot be easily dismissed. Homer did eat poison. He was told he would die. The episode showed him saying goodbye to everyone important in his life. The screen did fade to black at the moment when the poison should have killed him. These are facts from the actual episode, not speculation or exaggeration. What makes the theory particularly disturbing is how it transforms the show's comedy into tragedy. Every joke becomes Homer's consciousness, desperately trying to find joy in an afterlife where he is separated from his real family forever. Every adventure is a distraction from the truth that he died young and left his children without a father. Every reset to the status quo is purgatory, forcing him to confront his failures again because he has not learned from them yet. The show's decline in quality over later seasons could represent Homer's spirit becoming exhausted from repeating the same cycles. The comedy wearing thin because even in the afterlife, eternal repetition loses its appeal. The theory also explains why horrible things happen to Homer repeatedly without permanent consequences. He gets injured, hospitalized, nearly killed, and humiliated constantly throughout the series. In a normal life, the accumulation of trauma would break a person. In purgatory, suffering serves a purpose. Homer endures these trials as part of his purification process. The pain teaches him lessons about humility, empathy, and resilience. He can survive impossible injuries and bounce back immediately because he already died once. There are no stakes anymore. His purgatory cannot kill him because he is already dead. The presence of supernatural elements throughout the series supports the afterlife interpretation. Springfield hosts aliens, monsters, witches, demons, and magical beings on a regular basis. The Halloween episodes might represent Homer's purgatory becoming unstable, showing glimpses of other spiritual realms bleeding into his constructed reality. If he exists in a spiritual dimension, then encountering other spiritual entities makes sense. The barrier between different types of afterlife experiences would be thin in a place like purgatory. God and the devil appear in multiple episodes, often interacting with Homer directly or indirectly. If Homer is in purgatory, then these encounters take on a different meaning. God is checking on Homer's progress toward purification. The devil is tempting him to give up or accept his worst impulses. The spiritual battle for Homer's soul plays out across the entire series, with each episode representing a small skirmish in the larger war for his ultimate destination. Will Homer eventually learn enough to move on to heaven, or will he remain trapped in Springfield forever because he cannot overcome his fundamental selfishness? The theory cannot be definitively proven or disproven, which gives it staying power in fan discussions. The show's creators could deny it, but the canonical evidence exists regardless of intent. Homer ate poison. The episode showed him accepting death. The screen faded to black. When he woke up, the world had already started becoming stranger and less bound by normal rules. You can interpret these facts as a close call with death, followed by a return to normal life, or you can interpret them as the transition point between life and afterlife. Both readings are supported by what actually appears on screen. The emotional weight comes from how the theory recontextualizes every moment of the show as something Homer is experiencing while separated from his real family. When he hugs Bart, the real Bart is somewhere else living a life his father never got to see. When he tells Marge he loves her, the real Marge has moved on from grieving her husband, who died over 3 decades ago. The Springfield that Homer inhabits is a perfect replica of his memory, but it exists in a spiritual dimension completely disconnected from the real world. His children grew old, his friends moved away or died themselves. The Springfield he knew changed and evolved without him, but Homer remains frozen in 1991, repeating variations of the same life in a purgatory designed to look exactly like the world he lost when he ate poisonous fish at a sushi restaurant and paid the ultimate price for wanting to seem adventurous and cultured. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory that radiation from the nuclear plant is slowly mutating and killing the people of Springfield. There exists a fan theory about The Simpsons that transforms the show's distinctive visual style into evidence of an ongoing environmental catastrophe. According to this theory, the yellow skin that characterizes almost every resident of Springfield is not simply an artistic choice made by animators. It represents the visible effects of radiation poisoning from decades of exposure to nuclear contamination. The Springfield nuclear power plant, where Homer works as a safety inspector, has been leaking radioactive material into the environment since before the show began. Every character with yellow skin, every three-eyed fish in the lake, every bizarre mutation and inexplicable survival of fatal injuries can be traced back to the same source. Springfield is not just a cartoon town. It is a community being slowly killed by radiation while remaining completely unaware of what is happening to them. The canonical evidence for this theory appears in nearly every episode that shows the nuclear power plant or its environmental impact. The plant itself is depicted as a catastrophic failure of safety regulations and environmental protection. Glowing green barrels of radioactive waste appear throughout Springfield with disturbing frequency. They sit in playgrounds where children play. They get dumped into the lake and river. They pile up in abandoned lots. The opening credits of every episode show Homer carelessly handling a glowing green rod of plutonium at work, then dropping it when the whistle blows and driving home, without any concern for the radioactive material he just mishandled. This is not portrayed as unusual or alarming. It is Homer's daily routine. The show establishes early and repeatedly that Mr. Burns runs the nuclear plant with absolute disregard for safety or environmental regulations. He cuts corners constantly to save money. He ignores warnings from inspectors. He fires employees who report safety violations. He dumps toxic waste wherever it costs the least to dispose of it, which usually means directly into Springfield's natural water sources or burying it in shallow graves around town. The plant has had multiple meltdowns, leaks, and near catastrophes over the course of the series. In one episode, the plant literally glows green and visible radiation clouds pour from the smokestacks. Yet the plant continues operating with Homer as the primary safety inspector, despite his complete incompetence and Mr. Burns' active hostility toward any actual safety measures. The most direct piece of evidence for environmental radiation damage is Blinky, the three-eyed fish that lives in the waters near the nuclear plant. Blinky appears in multiple episodes and becomes somewhat famous within the show's universe as a symbol of the plant's environmental impact. The fish has three fully functional eyes arranged in a triangle on its head. This is not a natural mutation that could occur through normal evolutionary processes. Three-eyed fish do not exist in nature. Blinky's mutation can only be explained by exposure to radiation severe enough to cause dramatic genetic changes. The fish lives in water that receives direct runoff from the nuclear plant, and its deformity serves as a warning that something is fundamentally wrong with Springfield's environment. Blinky is not the only mutated animal in Springfield. The show features multiple instances of creatures with bizarre deformations or impossible characteristics. Squirrels with extra limbs appear in background shots. Birds with strange coloring or unusual features fly through scenes. The pet cemetery shows animals that died from unexplained illnesses. Santa's little helper, the family dog, has survived injuries and eaten substances that should have killed him multiple times. Snowball, the family cat, displays similar resilience. If animals throughout Springfield are being exposed to radiation, they would develop mutations and potentially increased resistance to toxins and injuries as their cells adapt to constant low-level exposure. The human residents of Springfield display the most obvious signs of radiation exposure through their distinctive yellow skin. In the real world, jaundice causes skin to turn yellow due to liver problems or bile duct issues. But the yellow skin in Springfield affects almost everyone regardless of age, health, or lifestyle. Babies are born yellow, elderly people are yellow, healthy athletes and sick patients alike share the same skin tone. The consistency suggests an environmental cause rather than individual medical conditions. If the entire population has been exposed to radiation since birth, or even before birth through their parents' contaminated bodies, yellow skin could be the visible marker of that exposure. Beyond skin color, Springfield residents display other physical characteristics consistent with radiation damage. Many characters have bulging eyes that protrude unnaturally from their faces. Burns himself appears skeletal and ancient, despite supposedly being in his 80s, as if radiation has accelerated his aging process or prevented his body from maintaining normal tissue. Homer has only 2 hairs on his head, despite being in his late 30s, suggesting radiation-induced hair loss. Barney transformed from a clean-cut college student into a bloated alcoholic, but his physical deterioration happened remarkably fast and includes changes that go beyond normal alcohol damage. These individual cases could be cartoon exaggeration, but when viewed collectively, they paint a picture of a population experiencing systematic physical degradation. The show frequently depicts workers at the nuclear plant displaying obvious symptoms of radiation sickness without recognizing what is happening to them. Lenny and Carl, Homer's coworkers, have both been injured in radiation-related accidents multiple times. Carl once had his arm glow green after exposure. Workers routinely handle radioactive materials without proper protective equipment. The plant's medical staff treats radiation burns and contamination as routine workplace injuries rather than serious health emergencies. In one episode, Homer brings a glowing green rod home from work, and it sits in Bart's room for days before anyone notices, exposing the entire family to direct radiation during that time. The resilience Springfield residents show when facing injuries, illnesses, and toxic exposures makes more sense if their bodies have adapted to constant radiation. Homer has survived being shot, stabbed, poisoned, crushed, burned, and electrocuted across hundreds of episodes. He bounces back from injuries that would hospitalize or kill a normal person. His liver has been shown to be massively enlarged and diseased, yet he continues drinking heavily with no apparent consequences. Marge has been exposed to toxic chemicals, endured extreme stress, and faced numerous health scares but remains functional. The children survive accidents that should cause permanent damage. If radiation has caused genetic changes in Springfield's population over generations, increased cellular regeneration and toxin resistance would be expected adaptations. The town itself shows signs of environmental contamination beyond just the immediate area around the plant. The soil in Springfield must contain radioactive particles that have settled there over decades of atmospheric contamination. Rain washes radiation from the air into the ground. Plants absorb it through their roots. Animals eat the plants and concentrate the radiation in their tissues. Humans eat the animals and accumulate even higher doses. This bioaccumulation means that people living in Springfield are consuming radiation with every meal, breathing it in the air, absorbing it through their skin when they swim in contaminated water, and passing it to their children through contaminated breast milk and genetic damage to reproductive cells. The lake and river that run through Springfield are almost certainly radioactive. The show depicts the plant dumping waste directly into these water sources repeatedly. Fish like Blinky prove the water is contaminated enough to cause severe mutations. Yet residents continue fishing in the lake, swimming in it during summer, and presumably some of Springfield's drinking water comes from these sources. Municipal water treatment plants are not designed to remove radioactive particles. If the water supply is contaminated, every shower, every glass of water, every meal cooked with tap water is delivering radiation directly into residents' bodies. Mr. Burns represents the knowing perpetrator of this ongoing disaster. He is fully aware that his plant contaminates the environment. He has seen the three-eyed fish. He knows about the safety violations. He has been confronted by environmental groups and government inspectors, yet he continues operating the plant in the same dangerous manner because changing would cost money and he values profit over human life. In one episode, he literally blocks out the sun to force people to use more electricity. His willingness to darken the entire town shows he has no limits to what he will do for financial gain. Compared to blocking the sun, poisoning the environment with radiation is a minor evil he commits without hesitation. The government agencies that should protect Springfield from this environmental catastrophe are shown to be completely incompetent or corrupt. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission inspectors who visit the plant are easily bribed or fooled by superficial compliance measures. The Environmental Protection Agency occasionally appears but never shuts down the plant despite obvious violations. Local government officials like Mayor Quimby are too focused on political survival to address long-term environmental threats. The legal system sides with powerful corporations over sick residents. Every institution that should serve as a check against industrial pollution has failed, leaving Springfield's population to suffer the consequences without recourse. The theory gains particular weight when you consider how radiation exposure affects communities across generations. The parents and grandparents of current Springfield residents were exposed to radiation first. They passed genetic damage to their children through corrupted DNA in egg and sperm cells. Those children were born with predisposition to mutations and were then exposed to even more radiation throughout their lives. Their children, the current generation of kids in Springfield, carry genetic damage from 2 generations of exposure plus their own direct contact with contaminated environment. Bart, Lisa, and Maggie may look relatively normal, but their cells likely contain mutations that will express themselves later in life or get passed to their own children if they ever have any. The lack of cancer in Springfield is actually suspicious rather than reassuring. In real communities near poorly managed nuclear facilities, cancer rates spike dramatically. Leukemia, thyroid cancer, and other radiation-linked diseases become epidemic. Yet Springfield shows remarkably few cancer cases despite obvious widespread contamination. This absence could be explained 2 ways. Either the radiation has caused mutations that make residents resistant to cancer as a survival adaptation, or people do develop cancer but die so routinely from other accidents and incidents that cancer never gets diagnosed. The show depicts characters dying and coming back frequently enough that death has become meaningless, which could mask an underlying health crisis. The visual style of the show takes on sinister implications under this interpretation. The bright yellows and greens that dominate Springfield's color palette are the colors of radiation and contamination. Yellow skin, green glowing waste, the green glow that sometimes emanates from the plant at night. Even the sky in Springfield often appears an unusual shade that does not quite match natural light, as if atmospheric particles scatter light differently due to radioactive dust. The exaggerated features of characters, the simplified anatomy, the way bodies deform and reform after injuries, all of it could be read as artistic representation of a population whose physical forms have become unstable at the cellular level due to radiation damage. The children of Springfield face the most tragic implications of this theory. They are born into a contaminated environment with no choice in the matter. Their bodies absorb radiation while developing, causing potential cognitive and physical impairments that will affect them for life. Bart's behavioral problems, Lisa's anxiety and depression, Maggie's inability or unwillingness to speak, Ralph's severe developmental delays, even Milhouse's terrible eyesight and general weakness could all be symptoms of prenatal and childhood radiation exposure affecting brain development and physical growth. The kids appear to accept their world as normal because they have never known anything else, but they are the most vulnerable victims of an environmental crime they cannot understand or escape. The school itself may be contaminated. Springfield Elementary is old, poorly maintained, and located close enough to the plant that atmospheric radiation would settle on the building and grounds. Children spend 6 to 8 hours per day in that environment during their most vulnerable developmental years. The cafeteria serves food that likely comes from local sources contaminated with radiation. The playground equipment could have radioactive dust settled into every surface. Groundskeeper Willie maintains grounds using soil that has absorbed decades of fallout. Every aspect of the children's daily environment exposes them to additional radiation beyond what they receive at home. The economic structure of Springfield traps residents in the contaminated zone. Many people work at the plant or in industries that depend on it. Housing prices are likely depressed due to proximity to a nuclear facility, which means people who buy homes in Springfield cannot afford to move elsewhere, even if they wanted to. The town has limited economic opportunities beyond the plant, so leaving means unemployment and poverty. Families like the Simpsons live paycheck to paycheck and could never afford to relocate. They are economically bound to a place that is literally poisoning them, forced to choose between financial survival and physical health. Online communities have discussed the radiation theory for years, particularly focusing on the yellow skin as evidence of contamination. Reddit threads catalog every instance of the plant dumping waste, every mutated creature, every unexplained health problem in Springfield. Users compare the show's depiction of nuclear safety to real-world incidents like Chernobyl or Fukushima, noting that Springfield's ongoing low-level contamination might actually be worse than a single catastrophic event because residents never evacuate and the exposure continues indefinitely. The slow accumulation of damage over decades could cause more total harm than one dramatic meltdown. Entertainment websites have picked up the theory as it has gained traction. CBR published an article in 2025 analyzing the radiation theory and arguing that the evidence throughout the show supports the interpretation that Springfield's residents are suffering from chronic radiation exposure. The article points to the family's resilience in accidents, the yellow skin, the three-eyed fish, and the constant safety violations as proof that something is fundamentally wrong with Springfield's environment. The piece treats the theory as a legitimate reading of the show's internal logic rather than just fan speculation. What makes this theory disturbing is how it transforms a cartoon aesthetic into a portrait of environmental genocide. The bright colors and exaggerated features that make The Simpsons visually appealing become markers of contamination and disease. Every joke about Homer's stupidity could be radiation-induced brain damage. Every sight gag involving impossible physics could be cells that no longer maintain proper structure. The show's refusal to allow characters to age or die permanently becomes evidence of mutations that have altered how human bodies function. Springfield is not a cartoon town. It is a population of radiation victims whose bodies have been changed so fundamentally that they no longer follow normal biological rules. The theory also highlights issues of environmental justice and corporate responsibility. Mr. Burns represents the capitalist owner who profits from an industry while externalizing the costs onto the community through pollution. He lives in a mansion far from the contaminated areas. He can afford the best medical care if he does get sick. Meanwhile, working-class families like The Simpsons absorb the radiation while earning barely enough to survive. The power plant enriches one man while sickening an entire town, and the legal and political systems allow it to continue because challenging corporate power is harder than accepting slow environmental death. The long-term implications are apocalyptic. If Springfield's population has been exposed to radiation for multiple generations, the genetic damage is now permanent and will continue affecting descendants even if the plant somehow stopped contaminating the environment today. Children born in Springfield will carry mutated DNA that predisposes them to health problems and physical abnormalities. Those children will pass even more corrupted genetic information to their own offspring. Eventually, the population may become so damaged that normal human reproduction fails entirely. Springfield could be watching its own extinction in slow motion, generation by generation becoming less viable until the town simply cannot sustain a population anymore. The theory cannot be proven false because the canonical evidence is overwhelming. The plant does dump radioactive waste everywhere. Blinky does exist as a three-eyed mutant. Safety violations happen constantly. The yellow skin affects everyone. These facts exist in the show regardless of whether the creators intended them as evidence of radiation damage. The theory simply connects the obvious dots that the show presents and reaches a logical conclusion about what those patterns mean for Springfield's residents. Every episode becomes horrifying when viewed through this lens. When Homer hugs his children, he is passing radiation absorbed at work into their smaller bodies through physical contact. When Marge cooks dinner, she is preparing food grown in contaminated soil or caught in poisoned water. When the kids play outside, they are breathing air filled with radioactive particles too small to see. When anyone in Springfield takes a shower, they are washing themselves in water that carries the invisible poison into every pore. The town exists in a state of permanent environmental emergency that no one acknowledges because the contamination is so normalized that residents cannot imagine life any other way. They are dying slowly, mutating constantly, and accepting it all as simply how the world works because they have never known and will never know anything different. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory that Springfield is trapped in a time loop outside normal reality. There exists a fan theory about The Simpsons that explains the show's most fundamental contradiction through cosmic horror rather than cartoon logic. According to this theory, Springfield exists in a closed temporal loop outside normal reality. Time passes within this loop, technology advances, culture evolves, and the outside world continues moving forward. But the people trapped inside Springfield cannot age, cannot truly die, and cannot escape the endless cycle of their existence. The town itself functions as a prison that resets continuity while maintaining just enough memory to torture its residents with the awareness that something is fundamentally wrong with their reality. The canonical evidence for this theory appears in every episode that references current events, while maintaining the same character ages. Bart Simpson has been 10 years old since 1989. Lisa has been 8. Maggie has been a baby for over 35 years. Homer and Marge remain in their late 30s, despite decades passing in the real world. The show began in an era of landline phones, VHS tapes, and analog television. Now episodes feature smartphones, streaming services, social media, and modern technology. The characters use these new tools and reference contemporary events, but they have not aged a single day since the loop began. This creates an impossible timeline that cannot exist in normal reality. Bart should be in his mid-40s by now. He should have graduated elementary school, attended high school and possibly college, started a career, maybe gotten married, and had children of his own. Lisa should be in her late 30s with her own adult life completely separate from her childhood in Springfield. Maggie should be a grown woman with decades of experiences and memories. Instead, they remain frozen at the exact ages they were when whatever trapped Springfield in this loop first activated. They attend the same school, live in the same house, have the same relationships, and experience the same family dynamics despite the world around them, transforming completely. The show demonstrates awareness of this temporal impossibility through occasional references to the passage of time. Characters mention events from previous episodes as if they happened years ago. Flashback episodes show Homer and Marge meeting and falling in love in different decades, depending on when the episode aired. In early seasons, Homer and Marge were teenagers in the 1970s. In later seasons, they met in the 1990s. The show retcons its own history to maintain the illusion that the characters are always roughly the same age relative to the present day. This constant revision of the past suggests that Springfield's timeline is not fixed, but instead adjusts itself to keep the loop consistent. Technology in Springfield updates in real time with the outside world, which should be impossible if the characters are not aging. When the show began, Homer worked at a nuclear plant with 1980s-era equipment and safety systems. Now the plant has modern computers, digital displays, and contemporary technology. The Simpson home has evolved from having a single landline telephone and a basic television to having smartphones, tablets, flat-screen TVs, and modern appliances. The children use devices that did not exist when the show started. Bart carries a smartphone despite being the same age he was before such devices were invented. The technology ages while the people using it do not. Pop culture references create another layer of temporal impossibility. Characters discuss current movies, music, news events, and celebrities. They watch shows that premiered long after The Simpsons itself began airing. They reference historical events that happened years or decades into the show's run. Presidential elections come and go with characters commenting on new administrations. Sports championships are won by teams that did not exist in Springfield's original era. The town exists in an eternal present that constantly updates to match the current year of the real world, while its residents remain locked at fixed ages that make no sense given the events they have witnessed. The loop theory suggests that something happened to Springfield that removed it from normal space-time. The town exists in a pocket dimension or a bubble universe where the usual rules of causality and linear time do not apply. Inside this pocket, time passes in a circular fashion rather than moving forward. Events occur, characters experience them, but then reality resets to a baseline state. The next episode begins with everyone back at their default positions. Homer works at the plant. Marge manages the household. Bart causes trouble at school. Lisa plays her saxophone. Maggie remains an infant. The events of previous episodes may or may not be remembered depending on what the current story requires. This reset mechanism creates a torturous existence for anyone trapped in the loop who maintains awareness of what is happening. The characters experience growth, learn lessons, form new relationships, and make meaningful changes to their lives. Then the episode ends and reality resets. Homer promises to be a better father and husband dozens of times across the series. He has genuine moments of growth where he seems to understand his flaws and commit to change. Then the next episode shows him repeating the same mistakes as if the previous growth never happened. He is trapped in an eternal cycle of learning and forgetting, improving and regressing, reaching for something better but never being allowed to actually grasp it. The same pattern applies to every character. Lisa fights for causes she believes in and occasionally wins temporary victories. But the next episode shows Springfield reverting to exactly the state she was fighting against. Marge leaves Homer multiple times when his behavior becomes intolerable. They reconcile, he promises to change, and the relationship resets to its dysfunctional baseline. Bart forms meaningful connections with people outside his usual social circle, experiences moments of genuine emotional depth, then returns to being the same troublemaker in the next episode, as if none of that growth occurred. Every character is condemned to repeat the same emotional arcs over and over without ever achieving lasting change. Some characters have died during the show's run, which seems to contradict the loop theory until you examine how death functions in Springfield. Maude Flanders died after being knocked off a stadium seat. The show acknowledged her death and showed Ned Flanders grieving and eventually moving on. But Maude was a supporting character, not part of the core family that seems most affected by the temporal loop. Her death served a specific narrative purpose and was allowed to be permanent. Other characters have died, usually minor or background figures who are not essential to the loop's maintenance. The deaths that matter, the core family and main supporting cast, never stick. They may appear to die in specific episodes but always return to life by the next one. Edna Krabappel represents an interesting case where a character's real-world death forced the show to acknowledge mortality. When the actress who voiced Edna died, the show retired the character rather than recasting. Edna disappears from Springfield with minimal explanation. This death was allowed to be permanent because it originated outside the loop, in the real world where time actually passes and people actually die. The loop could not resurrect Edna because her voice came from beyond Springfield's pocket dimension. This suggests the loop has rules and limitations, that it can only maintain the illusion of eternal present within certain boundaries. Background characters in Springfield do occasionally show signs of aging that the main cast never experiences. Apu's octuplets are born and grow from infants to toddlers over the course of the series, though they stop aging once they reach a certain point. Comic Book Guy dies in one episode and is replaced by a younger person who then becomes the new Comic Book Guy, suggesting that secondary characters can be swapped out while maintaining the loop's continuity. These minor changes indicate that the loop is not perfectly static. Small variations are allowed as long as they do not threaten the core structure that keeps the Simpson family frozen in time. The existence of a time loop explains the show's complete lack of consequences across episodes. Homer causes massive property damage, nearly destroys the town, starts international incidents, and commits crimes that should result in prison sentences. By the next episode, none of it matters. The town is rebuilt, relationships are restored, legal consequences evaporate. This is not just cartoon logic or sitcom conventions. It is the loop actively erasing consequences to maintain its stability. Springfield cannot allow permanent change because permanent change would mean time is actually moving forward, and the loop exists specifically to prevent forward temporal movement. Characters occasionally demonstrate awareness that something is wrong with their reality. They make jokes about not aging, about events that should have happened years ago, about the impossibility of their situation. These moments of meta-awareness could be the loop briefly failing to maintain its hold on their minds. For just a second, a character realizes they have been trapped in the same situation for decades. They glimpse the truth that time outside their bubble is passing normally while they remain frozen. Then the loop reasserts itself and they forget what they realized, returning to ignorance of their cosmic imprisonment. The loop's origin remains unexplained in the show, but several canonical possibilities exist. The nuclear power plant where Homer works could have caused a catastrophic accident that tore a hole in space-time. Mr. Burns has demonstrated access to advanced technology and has attempted reality-altering schemes multiple times. Perhaps one of his inventions accidentally trapped Springfield in a temporal anomaly. The government has secret facilities and experiments shown throughout the series. A military project gone wrong could have frozen Springfield in time while studying it from the outside. Aliens have appeared regularly in the show and possess technology far beyond human understanding. They could have trapped Springfield as an experiment or a zoo, observing how humans behave when locked in an eternal loop. The show has featured time travel in multiple episodes, establishing that temporal manipulation is possible within its universe. If time travel exists, then time loops, temporal pockets, and disrupted causality become possible as well. Perhaps someone from Springfield's future traveled back to prevent a disaster and accidentally created a loop instead. Or maybe someone deliberately created the loop to preserve Springfield at a specific point in time, saving it from some worse fate that would have occurred if time had continued normally. The most disturbing interpretation is that the loop is not an accident, but a prison sentence. Springfield committed some collective crime or sin that resulted in cosmic punishment. The entire town is being forced to relive their lives eternally without growth or escape as punishment for something they did. Every episode is another iteration of their sentence, another cycle through scenarios designed to highlight their flaws and failures without giving them the mercy of change or death. They are trapped in eternal recurrence like a twisted version of the myth of Sisyphus, condemned to push the same boulder up the same hill forever. The children of Springfield suffer the worst fate under this interpretation. Adults at least have memories of life before the loop if it started at some specific point, but Bart, Lisa, and Maggie have never known anything except this existence. They will never experience puberty, adolescence, adulthood, or any of the milestones that define human development. Bart will never drive a car, go to prom, graduate, fall in love as an adult, start a career, or have children. Lisa will never attend the prestigious universities her intelligence deserves. She will never become the musician or activist or leader she dreams of being. Maggie will never speak her first words, take her first steps, or develop beyond infancy. They are frozen at ages when their entire lives should be ahead of them, but instead they have no future at all, just endless repetition of the same childhood forever. The loop denies everyone in Springfield the fundamental human experience of linear time. People are defined partly by change, by growth, by the accumulation of experiences that shape who they become. Memory only has meaning if it connects to a past that leads to a present that moves toward a future. In Springfield's loop, memory becomes corrupted. The characters sometimes remember previous episodes and sometimes do not, depending on what the current story requires. Their sense of self must be fragmentary and confused because they cannot maintain a consistent personal history. They are trapped in an eternal now with only scattered recollections of a past that keeps changing and no concept of a future that will ever arrive. Relationships cannot deepen or evolve in the loop. Homer and Marge have been married for over 35 years in real time, but their relationship never matures beyond the same patterns established in early seasons. They should have grown together, learned to communicate better, developed the deep understanding that comes from decades of partnership. Instead, they repeat the same arguments, the same conflicts, the same reconciliations over and over. They are trapped at a point where their marriage is stable enough to continue, but troubled enough to generate comedic conflict. The loop will not let them divorce because that would be too much change, but it will not let them improve beyond a certain point, either because that would remove a source of story material. Friendships in Springfield suffer the same fate. Homer, Lenny, and Carl have worked together for decades. Their friendship should have deepened into something profound. Instead, it remains superficial, defined by drinking beer and making shallow jokes. They never discuss their hopes, fears, or dreams in any meaningful way because the loop will not allow that kind of growth. Every relationship in town is frozen at a specific level of depth that can generate stories but never progresses to true intimacy or understanding. The economic situation of Springfield's residents creates another layer of horror in the loop. The Simpsons live paycheck to paycheck despite Homer working the same job for over 30 years. In normal reality, that length of employment would result in promotions, pay raises, pension benefits, and financial security. But the loop keeps them permanently on the edge of poverty. They can never save enough money to improve their situation. They can never pay off their mortgage or build wealth that would allow them to escape their economic anxiety. Homer will work at the nuclear plant forever, earning the same inadequate wage, struggling with the same financial pressures, never advancing or retiring because the loop requires him to remain a working-class father, dealing with money problems. Online communities have discussed the loop theory extensively, particularly on Reddit, where users analyze the show's continuity problems through this lens. Threads catalog every instance where the show contradicts its own timeline, every moment where characters reference past events that could not have happened given their current ages, every technological update that makes no sense if time is not passing. The discussions treat the loop as the only logical explanation for why Springfield operates the way it does. WatchMojo and Ranker have both featured the time loop theory in their lists of popular Simpsons fan theories, recognizing it as one of the most common ways fans explain the show's internal contradictions. The theory appears in enough places and is discussed seriously enough that it has become almost canonical, despite never being officially confirmed. Entertainment websites covering the show's continuity issues inevitably mention the loop theory as a potential explanation. The show's writers themselves have made jokes about the timeline problems, acknowledging that the characters exist in a strange temporal state that does not follow normal rules. While they frame it as cartoon logic rather than a literal time loop, the effect is the same. Springfield exists outside normal time, and its residents are trapped there. What makes the loop theory so disturbing is how it recontextualizes every episode as another cycle of eternal suffering. When Homer learns to appreciate his family, that growth is temporary because the loop will erase it. When Lisa fights for social justice, her victories are meaningless because the loop will reset Springfield to its unjust baseline. When Bart forms a genuine connection with someone, that relationship cannot develop because the loop will separate them or make them forget. Every meaningful moment is actually tragic because it cannot last. Every lesson learned will be forgotten. Every promise made will be broken, not because the characters are bad people, but because the loop will not allow them to keep those promises. The show's comedy becomes darker when viewed through this interpretation. Jokes about Homer's stupidity are actually about a man whose brain cannot form new long-term memories properly because the loop keeps resetting his mental state. Gags about Marge's tolerance of Homer's behavior reflect a woman trapped in a relationship she cannot leave because the loop will always bring her back. Bart's pranks represent the desperate attempts of a child to create some kind of impact on a world that will not let him grow up. Lisa's saxophone playing is her screaming into the void, trying to express something meaningful in a reality that will not allow meaning to accumulate or build into anything lasting. The loop theory also explains why horrible things happen to Springfield residents without breaking them permanently. People in the town experience trauma, loss, humiliation, and pain constantly. In normal reality, the accumulation of trauma would leave lasting psychological damage. But in the loop, trauma cannot accumulate properly because memory and identity are not stable. A character experiences something terrible in one episode, and by the next episode they have mentally reset to a state before that trauma occurred. This protects them from being destroyed by endless suffering, but it also means they can never heal or grow from difficult experiences. They are stuck in an eternal present where neither the wounds of the past nor the hope of the future can exist. The background of Springfield suggests the loop may not be limited to just the town but could affect a larger area or even the entire world. The show depicts other cities and countries, features characters from around the globe, and references worldwide events. If the loop only affected Springfield, people could leave and escape it. But characters who leave for extended periods, like Homer's brother Herb or various celebrities who visit, always return or are forgotten. The loop may extend to encompass any location or person that becomes narratively important to Springfield's stories. It is a prison that expands to contain whatever it needs to maintain the core family's eternal repetition. Some characters seem more aware of the loop than others. Sideshow Bob returns repeatedly despite being killed or imprisoned permanently in multiple episodes. His awareness that he cannot actually die or escape Springfield drives him increasingly insane. He becomes obsessed with breaking free from the cycle, with finally killing Bart in a way that sticks, with accomplishing something permanent in a world that allows nothing to be permanent. His failure to achieve any lasting victory, despite his intelligence and planning, demonstrates the loop's power. No one can escape through force or cleverness. The loop is fundamental to Springfield's reality and cannot be overcome by any action taken from within it. The existence of the loop raises the question of whether anyone outside Springfield knows what happened. Does the rest of the world remember that Springfield exists but notice that it has been frozen in time for decades? Or does the loop somehow hide Springfield's temporal anomaly from external observation, making it appear normal to outsiders? If people from outside visit Springfield, do they become trapped in the loop as well? Or can they come and go freely while only the residents remain stuck? The show never answers these questions clearly, but the implications are troubling regardless of which possibility is true. The theory cannot be definitively proven or disproven because the canonical evidence supports both readings. You can interpret the show's timeline problems as simply cartoon convention, the necessary suspension of disbelief that allows a sitcom to run for decades without characters aging. Or you can interpret the same evidence as proof that Springfield exists in a literal time loop that traps its residents in eternal recurrence. Both readings are valid based on what appears on screen. The difference is whether you view the show as harmless entertainment or as a horror story about people trapped in a cosmic prison they cannot perceive or escape. Every new episode that airs adds another cycle to the loop, another iteration of the same patterns. The characters live through new scenarios, meet new people, face new challenges, but fundamentally nothing changes. They cannot change. The loop will not allow it. Springfield is a town cursed to exist forever in an eternal present, its residents condemned to repeat the same lives over and over while the outside world moves forward without them. They are ghosts haunting their own existence, trapped in a moment that never ends and never truly begins again. They will cycle through sitcom plots forever, learning and forgetting, growing and resetting, living and never dying, imprisoned in a reality that looks like freedom but is actually the most perfect cage ever constructed. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory of dead Bart and the idea of a hidden canonical timeline where Bart actually died. There exists an urban legend about The Simpsons that has become so embedded in fan culture that it influences how people interpret actual episodes of the show. The legend is called Dead Bart, and it describes a lost episode from season 1 where Bart Simpson dies in a plane crash and the family descends into realistic, devastating grief. The episode does not exist and never did. It is a creepypasta, internet horror fiction designed to unsettle readers by corrupting something familiar and innocent. But the legend has spread so widely and affected the fan base so deeply that some discussions treat it as if there might be a hidden canonical timeline where Bart actually died, and the show we watch now is a sanitized replacement that erased that darkness. The Simpsons itself has acknowledged the legend's existence, referencing it directly in later episodes, which creates a strange feedback loop where fictional horror about the show becomes part of the show's actual mythology. The Dead Bart creepypasta emerged in the early days of internet horror communities. It follows the standard format of lost episode stories that were popular in online horror circles during the late 2000s. The story claims that there exists a banned episode with the production code 7G06 that aired once during the show's first season and was immediately pulled from rotation. According to the legend, the episode begins normally with the Simpson family boarding a plane for a vacation. Bart misbehaves on the plane, running up and down the aisle and bothering other passengers. The pilot tells him to sit down, but Bart ignores the warning. He finds an emergency door and somehow manages to open it. The cabin depressurizes and Bart is sucked out of the plane. In the creepypasta's description, what follows is nothing like normal Simpsons content. The episode does not cut away or make a joke. It shows Bart falling through the sky in complete silence. The animation becomes more detailed and realistic. His expression changes from shock to terror to acceptance as he plummets toward the ground. The fall continues for an uncomfortably long time, making viewers sit with the reality of what is happening. Eventually, Bart hits the ground and dies. The impact is not shown, but the implication is clear. The plane lands and the family learns that Bart fell out. They identify his body. They plan a funeral. The legend describes the rest of the episode as a realistic portrayal of a family destroyed by the death of a child. Homer blames himself for not controlling Bart better. Marge falls into depression and stops speaking. Lisa cannot process the loss of her brother. Maggie cries constantly. The family attends Bart's funeral and the episode shows them sitting in the cemetery in complete silence for several minutes of screen time. No jokes are made, no comfort is offered. The animation style shifts to something more grounded and less cartoonish. The bright colors of Springfield fade into muted grays and browns. The episode ends with the family sitting in their living room, not speaking, not moving, just existing in their grief. According to the creepypasta, the episode includes bizarre additional elements that push it into supernatural territory. The funeral scene supposedly shows real gravestones with names and dates of people who had not died yet when the episode was made but who died later in real life. The attendees at Bart's funeral include people the creators of the show would meet years in the future. The episode contains knowledge it should not have, as if it was created outside normal time or by someone who could see the future. These impossible elements are what supposedly convinced network executives to ban the episode and remove all evidence of its existence. The story is obviously false. The production code 7G06 does not exist in The Simpsons' actual production history. The show has never produced an episode with that number. No credible evidence of such an episode has ever surfaced, despite the legend claiming it aired publicly at least once. Animation production records are extremely detailed and tracked carefully, making it impossible for an entire episode to be created, aired, and then vanished without leaving documentation. The story follows the exact template of dozens of other lost episode creepypastas about various cartoons that were popular in internet horror communities during a specific era. What makes Dead Bart significant despite being fiction is how thoroughly it has penetrated Simpsons fan culture. Entire wikis exist dedicated to analyzing the fake episode. YouTube videos discuss it as if it might be real. Reddit threads debate the details of a story everyone knows is made up. The creepypasta has been shared so many times and discussed so extensively that it has become a permanent part of how some fans think about the show. It represents a dark alternate version of The Simpsons that exists only in imagination, but feels real enough to influence interpretation of actual episodes. The show itself acknowledged the Dead Bart legend directly in the season 30 episode titled Bart's Not Dead, which aired in 2018. In that episode, Bart fakes having a near-death experience where he claims to have visited heaven and seen God. The story gets picked up by Christian filmmakers who want to make a movie about Bart's supposed miracle. Throughout the episode, there are subtle references to the Dead Bart creepypasta woven into the plot. The title itself is a direct response to the urban legend. By naming the episode Bart's Not Dead, the show is explicitly addressing the most famous story about Bart dying. The episode includes moments that mirror elements of the creepypasta while subverting them, acknowledging that the writers are aware of the legend and are playing with fan expectations. Mental Floss and other entertainment websites have documented how The Simpsons frequently references and debunks fan legends and conspiracy theories about the show. Articles discuss how the writers are aware of what fans say online and occasionally incorporate those discussions into actual episodes. The decision to directly reference Dead Bart in a canonical episode creates a strange situation where a completely fictional horror story becomes part of the show's real mythology through acknowledgement. The show cannot confirm that Dead Bart exists because it does not, but by referencing it, the show validates its cultural significance, even while debunking it. This creates a framework where some fans discuss The Simpsons as if there might be two timelines. In one timeline, Bart died early in the show's run, and the series became a bleak, realistic drama about a family destroyed by grief. In the other timeline, the one we actually watch, Bart survived and the show remained a comedy. The Dead Bart legend plants the idea that somewhere in an alternate version of reality, or in lost production materials, there exists a Simpsons that is fundamentally different from what made it to air. This alternate version rejected the sitcom format and cartoon logic in favor of confronting the actual consequences of the violence and danger that the real show treats as comedy. The legend affects how some viewers interpret later episodes that show dark or realistic futures for the characters. The show has aired multiple episodes depicting possible futures where the characters have aged and their lives have gone in various directions. Some of these futures are optimistic, showing the family happy and successful. Others are deeply pessimistic, showing broken relationships, failures, and disappointments. When these bleak future episodes air, discussions sometimes reference dead Bart, treating the creepypasta as a prototype for what The Simpsons looks like when it abandons comedy for realism. The fake episode serves as a reference point for the darkest possible version of the show. Episodes that show Bart in danger or that temporarily kill him off take on additional weight for fans familiar with the dead Bart legend. The show has depicted Bart's death in various non-canonical ways, usually in Halloween episodes or dream sequences. These deaths are played for comedy or horror, but are never permanent. Yet for viewers who know the dead Bart story, there is always a moment of recognition when Bart dies on screen, even temporarily. The legend has created a space in fan consciousness where Bart's death feels like it has already happened in some version of the show, making fictional deaths resonate differently than they would otherwise. The creepypasta's description of the family falling into realistic grief after Bart's death invites comparison to how the actual show handles death and loss. The Simpsons has depicted characters dying, particularly supporting cast members and elderly relatives. These deaths are sometimes treated seriously with episodes showing genuine grief and emotional processing. Maud Flanders dies and the show spends multiple episodes exploring how Ned and his children cope with the loss. When the actress who voiced Edna Krabappel died, the show retired the character and included subtle tributes to her. The show is capable of depicting realistic grief when it chooses to do so, but the show has never killed a member of the core Simpson family and dealt with the aftermath in a realistic way. Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie are protected by narrative immortality. They can appear to die in non-canonical episodes, but they always return by the next episode. The show operates on the assumption that the family is permanent and unchanging. Dead Bart represents the violation of that assumption. It imagines what The Simpsons would look like if the protective barrier around the main characters was removed and they faced real permanent consequences for the dangerous situations the show regularly puts them in. The legend specifically chooses Bart as the family member who dies, which is significant. Bart is arguably the most recognizable character from The Simpsons and was the breakout star during the show's early years. His catchphrases, his rebellious attitude, and his distinctive appearance made him a cultural icon. Killing Bart in the story represents killing the heart of what made the show popular. It takes the character most associated with the show's irreverent humor and removes him permanently, forcing the remaining characters to continue in a world without the energy and chaos he brought to every episode. The description of the animation style changing after Bart's death is particularly interesting. The creepypasta claims the show becomes more realistic, with more detailed artwork and muted colors. This represents a shift from cartoon logic to something approaching realism. The Simpsons is drawn in a very specific style with bright yellows, simple character designs, and exaggerated proportions. That style signals to viewers that this is a cartoon where normal rules do not apply. By describing the dead Bart episode as abandoning that style, the legend suggests that Bart's death breaks the show's fundamental nature and forces it into a different genre entirely. It stops being a cartoon sitcom and becomes something closer to rotoscoped drama or realistic animation. The claim that the episode shows gravestones of people who had not died yet adds a supernatural element that moves the story from tragedy into horror. If the episode really did predict future deaths, it would suggest that the episode exists outside normal time or was created by something with knowledge of the future. This impossible element serves to explain why such an episode would be suppressed. It is not just that the content is too dark for a sitcom, it is that the episode itself is cursed or supernatural, containing information it should not have. This transforms the story from the show made a mistake by going too dark to the show accidentally created something evil that had to be destroyed. Online communities have spent years analyzing the dead Bart legend despite knowing it is false. Discussions break down every element of the story, compare it to actual Simpsons episodes, and debate what such an episode would mean if it existed. Some fans have even created fake screenshots or animated segments trying to bring the creepypasta to life visually. These fan creations perpetuate the legend by making it feel more real, giving visual form to something that only existed in text descriptions. The community investment in a completely fictional episode demonstrates how powerful the legend has become. The Dead Bart story taps into a specific anxiety about children's entertainment and corporate sanitization. The legend suggests that at some point The Simpsons tried to be something darker and more honest than what network television would allow. The banned episode represents artistic vision that was too pure or too real for commercial constraints. This feeds into a broader cultural narrative about how corporate media softens and sanitizes content to be safe and marketable. Dead Bart becomes a symbol of the authentic version of The Simpsons that existed before commercial concerns forced it to be less challenging and less real. This narrative is complicated by the fact that The Simpsons has always been a commercial product designed to be entertaining and marketable. The show has pushed boundaries and addressed serious topics throughout its run, but it has always operated within the framework of being a network sitcom aimed at broad audiences. The idea that there was ever a version of the show dark enough to be banned is fantasy. But the fantasy resonates because it imagines a version of The Simpsons that fully commits to the darkness that the real show only hints at before pulling back into comedy. The legend also reflects anxieties specific to early Simpsons fandom. When the show premiered, it was controversial for being too adult and too subversive for a cartoon. Parents complained about Bart being a bad role model. Schools banned Bart Simpson merchandise. The show was seen as dangerous to children and corrupting to traditional values. Dead Bart can be read as an extreme version of those early anxieties, imagining what would happen if the show went as far as its critics feared it might. Instead of just being a bad influence, the show would become genuinely traumatic, depicting child death and family destruction in a way that would scar viewers permanently. The creepypasta's format itself is significant to understanding its impact. Lost episode stories were extremely popular in internet horror communities during a specific era. These stories follow a template where the narrator discovers a lost or banned episode of a beloved children's show. The episode contains disturbing content that was deemed too dark or too real for broadcast. Often, the episode involves characters dying, suffering, or experiencing horror that contradicts the show's normal tone. The format works because it corrupts nostalgia. It takes something comforting from childhood and reveals a hidden darkness beneath the surface. Dead Bart is perhaps the most successful example of this format. While there are lost episode creepypastas about SpongeBob, Mickey Mouse, and other cartoons, none have penetrated mainstream discussion of their source material the way Dead Bart has affected Simpsons fandom. The story succeeded because it targeted a show that already had a history of pushing boundaries and being controversial. It was believable enough in concept that people could imagine such an episode existing even if they knew it did not. The Simpsons is dark enough and subversive enough that a brutally realistic episode about child death feels like it could have been attempted, even if common sense says it never would have aired. The show's decision to reference Dead Bart in a canonical episode creates a permanent connection between the fake story and the real show. Anyone researching the Dead Bart legend will discover that The Simpsons itself acknowledged the legend's existence. This acknowledgement does not confirm the legend is true, but it validates the legend's importance to fan culture. The show is essentially saying, "We know you. Talk about this. We know it matters to you, and we're going to incorporate that awareness into our content." This creates a feedback loop where fan speculation and official content influence each other. The disturbing aspect of the Dead Bart phenomenon is not the fake episode itself, but how it has infected real discussions about The Simpsons. Fans cannot discuss Bart dying, even in clearly non-canonical contexts, without someone bringing up the creepypasta. The legend has established a template in fan consciousness for what The Simpsons looks like when it abandons comedy for realism. That template affects how people interpret actual episodes that show dark futures or realistic consequences. The fake episode serves as a lens that makes the real show appear darker than it actually is. The legend also raises questions about what fans actually want from The Simpsons. The creepypasta describes an episode that would be genuinely upsetting and traumatic to watch. It depicts child death and family grief in realistic detail, without the softening of cartoon logic or comedy. Yet the legend has become beloved in fan circles, discussed endlessly, and even directly acknowledged by the show itself. This suggests that part of the audience wants The Simpsons to be darker and more realistic than it actually is. They want to see what happens when the protective bubble around the characters is removed, and they face real consequences. The show has experimented with darker tones in various episodes, particularly in later seasons when the writers have more freedom to take risks. Episodes have depicted genuine emotional pain, serious social issues, and moments of real darkness. But the show always pulls back before going as far as Dead Bart describes. There is always a joke to relieve tension, always a reset button that returns characters to safety. The legend represents what the show would look like if that safety valve was removed and the darkness was allowed to play out to its full conclusion without comedy to soften the impact. The idea of a hidden timeline where Bart died serves a psychological function for fans. It allows them to engage with the show on multiple levels simultaneously. They can enjoy The Simpsons as a comedy while also entertaining the possibility that somewhere in an alternate reality, the show became a tragedy. This dual engagement makes the show more complex and interesting than it would be if it was only ever one thing. The Dead Bart legend adds a layer of darkness that exists in imagination, making the actual show feel deeper by contrast. Every time Bart survives a dangerous situation in the real show, fans familiar with the legend might think about the alternate timeline where he did not survive. Every family moment becomes more precious when viewed against the possibility of a version where that family was destroyed by loss. The legend makes the comedy sharper by providing a dark contrast that exists only in fan consciousness. The IKM Simpsons becomes two shows at once, the one that airs and the one that exists in the collective imagination of fans who cannot forget a story about an episode that never existed. The legend persists because it cannot be fully debunked. The show can reference it, writers can deny it, and researchers can prove it never existed. But the story is so embedded in fan culture at this point that it has taken on a life independent of questions about whether it is real. Dead Bart is not just a claim about a lost episode anymore. It is a thought experiment about what The Simpsons would be if it was willing to go to the darkest possible places. It is a collective nightmare that the fan base shares, a vision of the show stripped of everything that makes it comforting and safe. It is a story that fans know is false but cannot stop thinking about because it reveals something true about their relationship with the show and what they secretly want from it, even while knowing they could never actually handle seeing it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory that Maude Flanders was a sociopath who secretly wanted Ned dead. There exists a fan theory about The Simpsons that transforms one of Springfield's most wholesome characters into a potential sociopath and murderer. The theory suggests that Maude Flanders, the seemingly devout and loving wife of Ned Flanders, was actually a cold and calculating woman who showed disturbing indifference to her husband's safety and may have actively hoped he would die. The theory originated in discussions on the No Homers Club, a long-running Simpsons fan community, where users began cataloging moments across early seasons where Maude's behavior toward Ned seems shockingly callous. Ranker later summarized this theory in their collections of Dark Simpsons fan interpretations, arguing that Maude repeatedly abandoned Ned in life, threatening situations, or showed complete lack of concern when he was in mortal danger. What makes this theory particularly unsettling is that it reframes Ned's grief after Maude's death in season 11 as the tragedy of a man mourning a woman who never truly loved him and may have spent years hoping he would die first. The canonical evidence for Maude's disturbing behavior appears in multiple episodes from the show's early and middle seasons, long before her actual death. One of the most frequently cited examples occurs in the episode Bart's Comet from season 6. In this episode, a comet is heading directly towards Springfield, and everyone believes the town will be destroyed. The entire community gathers in the Flanders family bomb shelter because Ned built the only structure capable of surviving the impact. However, the shelter is too small to hold everyone. A debate breaks out about who should be forced to leave the shelter to make room for others. Eventually, Ned, being the selfless person he is, volunteers to leave the shelter and face the comet alone so that everyone else can survive. This is where Maude's behavior becomes disturbing. When Ned announces he will sacrifice himself, Maude shows no emotional reaction. She does not protest. She does not beg him to stay. She does not suggest that she should be the one to leave instead so their children can keep their father. She simply accepts his decision without objection and remains safely in the shelter while her husband walks out to what everyone believes will be certain death. The episode shows various characters reacting to Ned's sacrifice with admiration or guilt, but Maude is notably absent from these emotional responses. She appears comfortable letting her husband die while she survives. The scene becomes even more suspicious when you compare Maude's reaction to how other spouses in Springfield respond when their partners are in danger. When Homer is in life-threatening situations, Marge consistently shows panic, fear, and desperate attempts to save him, despite their troubled marriage. When other characters face danger, their family members react with appropriate concern. But Maude treats Ned's impending death as if it is a minor inconvenience rather than the loss of her husband and the father of her children. Her lack of emotional response is so unusual that it stands out as genuinely abnormal, even in a cartoon where characters regularly face absurd situations. Another piece of evidence comes from episodes where Ned faces dangerous animals. In at least one instance, Ned encounters a bear and is in serious danger of being attacked. Maud's response to this situation is not to help her husband, or call for assistance, or show any concern for his safety. Instead, according to the theory's supporters, she either leaves the scene entirely or shows complete indifference to whether Ned survives the encounter. The specific details vary depending on which episode fans are referencing, but the pattern remains consistent. When Ned is in danger, Maud does not behave like a concerned wife. She behaves like someone who would not be particularly upset if the danger resolved itself by killing her husband. The theory also points to scenes involving rooftops or heights where Ned finds himself in precarious positions. The Simpsons frequently uses visual gags involving characters on roofs, ladders, or high places where they could fall and be seriously injured. In several of these scenarios involving Ned, Maud is present but shows no urgency about getting him to safety. She does not call out warnings. She does not attempt to stabilize whatever he is standing on. She does not show the kind of immediate protective instinct that most people display when someone they love is about to fall from a dangerous height. Her calm demeanor in these situations reads as either sociopathic lack of empathy or active hope that gravity will solve whatever problem she has with her marriage. What makes these moments particularly suspicious is that they form a pattern rather than being isolated incidents. If Maud showed indifference to Ned's safety once, it could be dismissed as the writers using her character inconsistently or not thinking through the implications of a scene. But when the same behavior appears across multiple episodes spanning several seasons, it suggests something deeper about how Maud views her husband and their relationship. The pattern indicates that Maud fundamentally does not care whether Ned lives or dies, and may actually prefer the latter outcome. The theory invites viewers to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the Flanders marriage. On the surface, Ned and Maud appear to be the ideal Christian couple. They attend church together faithfully. They raise their children according to strict religious principles. They present a united front to their community. Ned frequently speaks about Maud with affection and treats her with respect and devotion. The show positions them as the stable, wholesome counterpoint to Homer and Marge's more dysfunctional relationship. But if Maud is actually a sociopath who feels no genuine love for Ned, then the entire marriage is a lie that Ned is too naive or too committed to his religious beliefs to recognize. Sociopathy, clinically referred to as antisocial personality disorder, is characterized by lack of empathy, inability to form genuine emotional bonds, and willingness to manipulate or harm others without remorse. Sociopaths can be highly skilled at mimicking normal emotional responses and maintaining appearances of caring relationships while feeling nothing authentic underneath. If Maud is a sociopath, she would be capable of playing the role of devoted wife in public, while privately feeling complete indifference to Ned's well-being. Her religious participation could be entirely performative, a social role she adopts because it provides cover and respectability rather than reflecting any genuine faith or moral feeling. The show provides subtle hints that Maud may be going through the motions of being a good wife without actually feeling the emotions that should accompany those actions. She says the right things when Ned speaks about their relationship. She participates in church activities and community events alongside him. She manages their household and raises their children according to the standards Ned values. But when situations arise that would trigger genuine emotional responses in a person who actually loves their spouse, Maud displays a flatness that suggests she is operating without authentic feelings. The mask slips specifically in moments of danger when instinctive protective emotions should override social performance. And what shows beneath the mask is emptiness. This reading transforms every interaction between Ned and Maud into something deeply sad. When Ned expresses love for his wife, he is loving someone who does not love him back and possibly wishes he were dead. When he trusts her to care about his safety, he is placing faith in someone who has repeatedly demonstrated through her actions that his survival is irrelevant to her. When he makes decisions based on what he believes is best for their marriage and family, he is trying to maintain a relationship that only exists in his own mind because Maud experiences no real connection to him or anyone else. The theory becomes even darker when you consider that Ned is characterized throughout the series as almost pathologically good and trusting. He assumes the best of people. He interprets situations through a lens of Christian charity. He believes in the sanctity of marriage and would never consider that his wife might not reciprocate his feelings. These personality traits make him the perfect victim for a sociopathic spouse. He would never suspect what Maud really is because suspicion requires a level of cynicism that Ned fundamentally lacks. He could be married to someone who wants him dead, and he would never recognize the danger because his worldview does not allow for that possibility. Maud's own death in season 11 takes on a different meaning under this interpretation. In the actual episode, Maud dies in a freak accident at a racetrack when she is hit by a t-shirt cannon and knocked off the bleachers. The show treats this as a tragic random event that devastates Ned and leaves him a widower struggling to raise his sons alone. Her death is portrayed as a loss not just for Ned but for Springfield as a whole, because Maud represented stability and goodness in the community. But if Maud spent years hoping Ned would die and showing indifference to his safety, her own accidental death becomes darkly ironic. She wanted Ned to die first, possibly so she could be free of the marriage or collect life insurance, or simply because she enjoyed the fantasy of his death. Instead, she is the one who dies in a random accident while Ned survives. The universe denied her what she wanted and gave her the opposite outcome. Ned is left alive while the woman who may have wished for his death is the one who ends up in the ground. The irony extends to Ned's grief response after Maud's death. The show depicts Ned going through an extended period of mourning. He struggles with loneliness. He questions his faith when prayers do not bring comfort. He eventually begins dating again, but finds it difficult to connect with anyone because he is still in love with Maud's memory. He raises his sons while carrying the emotional weight of losing his wife. His entire character arc for multiple seasons after Maud's death revolves around processing grief and learning to move forward while honoring what he believes was a beautiful marriage. If Maud never loved him and actively wanted him dead, then Ned's grief is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what their relationship actually was. He is mourning a woman who did not deserve his tears. He is treasuring memories of a marriage that was one-sided at best and predatory at worst. He is teaching his sons to honor their mother's memory when their mother may have been a sociopath, incapable of loving them or their father. The tragedy is not that Ned lost someone who loved him. The tragedy is that Ned is so good and so trusting that he will never realize he lost someone who felt nothing for him and possibly wanted him dead. The sons, Rod and Todd, add another layer to the theory's disturbing implications. If Maud is a sociopath, she would be incapable of forming genuine maternal bonds with her children. She might go through the motions of parenting because it is socially expected and because it maintains her cover as a normal person, but she would feel no authentic love for Rod and Todd. The boys would grow up with a mother who provided physical care but no emotional warmth, though they would not understand what was missing because children generally accept whatever parenting they receive as normal. Ned's excessive involvement in his sons' lives might partially stem from unconsciously compensating for emotional coldness from Maud that he never consciously recognized. Other characters' perceptions of Maud support the theory in subtle ways. Maud is rarely the focus of episodes or storylines. She appears primarily as Ned's wife or as part of crowd scenes. When other characters interact with her, the interactions are superficial and socially appropriate, but lack the warmth and connection that characterize genuine friendships in Springfield. Marge is friendly with Maud because they are neighbors and because Marge is friendly with everyone, but their relationship never deepens beyond polite neighborliness. Other women in Springfield do not seek out Maud's company or treat her as a close friend. She exists on the periphery of the community, present but not truly connected, which is consistent with how sociopaths often relate to others. The show's writers may not have intentionally written Maud as a sociopath, but they created a character who was so underdeveloped and showed so little emotional depth that fans could read sociopathy into her behavior without contradicting canon. Maud functioned primarily as a prop to support Ned's characterization, rather than being a fully realized person in her own right. This lack of development left room for interpretations like the sociopath theory to fill in the gaps with something darker than the writers likely intended. The theory's popularity in fan communities suggests that viewers are drawn to the idea of hidden darkness beneath Springfield's wholesome surface. Ned and Maud represent traditional family values and religious devotion, positioning them as moral anchors in a town full of dysfunction. Revealing that this seemingly perfect marriage was actually based on one partner being a sociopath who wanted the other dead subverts the wholesome image. In a shocking way, it suggests that even the most apparently stable and moral relationships in Springfield might be hiding dark truths that never surface in normal episodes. The sociopath reading also provides a different lens for understanding why Maud was killed off. The actress who voiced Maud, Maggie Roswell, left the show due to a salary dispute, which is the real-world reason the character was written out. But within the fiction, you could interpret Maud's death as the universe correcting an imbalance. Maud wanted Ned dead and showed callous disregard for his safety repeatedly. Instead of getting what she wanted, she ended up being the one who died, leaving Ned alive to mourn someone who never deserved his devotion. There is a kind of cosmic justice to a sociopath who wished death on others being killed in a random accident, while her intended victim survives. The timing of Maud's various acts of indifference toward Ned's safety is significant. These moments occur throughout the first 10 seasons of the show, establishing a pattern long before her death in season 11. This means that if you accept the sociopath theory, Maud spent approximately a decade displaying warning signs that she did not care about Ned's survival. The pattern was there for anyone to see, but Ned never saw it because he was too trusting and too committed to believing in the goodness of his wife and the sanctity of their marriage to recognize what was happening. The religious dimension of the Flanders marriage makes the theory even more disturbing. Ned's faith is the central aspect of his character. He believes in God, in biblical principles, in the importance of Christian marriage. He views his relationship with Maud through a religious lens where marriage is a sacred covenant that reflects divine love. If Maud is a sociopath, then she is using religion as a mask to hide her true nature. She participates in church not because she believes, but because it provides social cover and makes her appear normal and trustworthy. She uses Ned's faith against him by knowing he will interpret her behavior through a charitable religious framework that assumes the best of people, and particularly of one's spouse. This exploitation of religious trust adds a layer of cruelty to Maud's character, if the theory is accurate. A sociopath married to someone less trusting might eventually be discovered and exposed, but a sociopath married to someone whose entire worldview is built on faith, trust, and seeing the good in others has found the perfect victim who will never see through the deception. Ned's greatest virtue, his sincere faith and goodness, becomes his greatest vulnerability because it blinds him to the possibility that the person sleeping next to him every night might be a monster wearing the mask of a devoted Christian wife. The fan theory cannot be definitively proven because the show never explicitly confirms that Maud is a sociopath. The evidence consists of behavioral patterns and emotional absences that can be interpreted as either writing inconsistencies or deliberate characterization. But the interpretation is supported strongly enough by canon that it cannot be easily dismissed. Maud did show disturbing lack of concern when Ned faced death. She did remain calm in situations that should have triggered protective instincts. She did display emotional flatness in moments when genuine feeling should have broken through. These are facts from actual episodes, not invented details. The theory persists in fan communities because it makes the show more complex and interesting. It adds psychological depth to a character who was never developed beyond being Ned's wife. It transforms what appeared to be a wholesome relationship into something sinister and tragic. It creates layers of irony around Ned's grief that make his mourning both touching and heartbreaking, because he is grieving someone who never existed except in his own loving imagination of who his wife was. The disturbing power of the theory comes from how it recontextualizes everything about the Flanders family. Every scene where Ned speaks lovingly about Maud becomes painful because you know she may have felt nothing in return. Every time the family appears together at church or community events, you see a facade maintained by a sociopath and believed by her victims. Every moment of Ned trusting Maud with his safety becomes horrifying because she has already demonstrated that she would be fine with him dying. And every episode after Maud's death, where Ned mourns and struggles and eventually begins to heal, becomes tragic because he is healing from a loss that should have freed him from someone who wished him dead. But instead, he treasures the memory of his destroyer because he is too good to ever understand what she really was. The Maud a sociopath theory transforms a minor character who died in season 11 into one of the darkest figures in Springfield. She represents the possibility that evil can hide behind perfect respectability, that sociopaths can maintain convincing performances for years or decades, and that the people who love most deeply and trust most completely are the most vulnerable to being victimized by those incapable of love. Ned Flanders spent years married to someone who wanted him dead, and he never knew it. After she died, he mourned her as if she had been his soulmate. He still speaks of her with reverence years later. The cruelty of the situation is that Ned's goodness ensures he will never recognize what Maud was, and so he will spend the rest of his life treasuring a lie and missing someone who never missed him back. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we've got the theory that the Simpson family are geniuses who chose ignorance and self-inflicted brain damage. There exists a fan theory about the Simpsons that transforms the family's perceived stupidity into a conscious choice rather than a natural condition. According to this theory, every member of the Simpson family possesses exceptional intelligence, but Homer and Bart have deliberately sabotaged their own cognitive abilities because they discovered that being smart makes life more painful and socially isolating. The theory combines canonical evidence from multiple episodes with long-running observations about patterns in the family's behavior. The primary piece of evidence comes from the season 12 episode titled Homer, where doctors discover that Homer has had a crayon lodged in his brain since childhood. When the crayon is removed, Homer transforms into an intelligent, articulate person capable of deep thinking and complex analysis. But this newfound intelligence makes him miserable and alienated from everyone he loves, so he makes the conscious decision to have the crayon reinserted into his brain, deliberately lowering his IQ back to its previous level. This episode establishes that Homer is not naturally stupid, but has been living with self-inflicted brain damage that he ultimately chooses to maintain because ignorance truly is bliss. The Homer episode provides the canonical foundation for understanding Homer's intelligence. When doctors perform an X-ray after Homer suffers a head injury, they discover a crayon that has been embedded in his brain since he was 6 years old. The crayon has been pressing against Homer's frontal lobe for over 30 years, causing the cognitive impairments and poor impulse control that define his personality. Homer has no memory of how the crayon got there, but a flashback shows young Homer as a child shoving crayons up his nose on a dare and accidentally pushing one so far that it penetrated into his brain tissue. When the crayon is surgically removed, the change in Homer is immediate and dramatic. He becomes articulate and uses sophisticated vocabulary. He develops an appreciation for art, literature, and classical music. He analyzes complex social and political issues with nuance and insight. He writes a detailed report about safety violations at the nuclear power plant that gets the facility temporarily shut down. He becomes emotionally sensitive and aware of subtleties in human interaction that he previously missed. He transforms from the bumbling fool everyone knows into a thoughtful, intelligent person who sees the world clearly and thinks deeply about what he observes. But this transformation makes Homer deeply unhappy. His new intelligence allows him to see all the problems in his life that ignorance previously shielded him from. He recognizes how his friends are shallow and mean-spirited. He realizes his job is meaningless and his boss is evil. He understands that most of his relationships are based on shared stupidity rather than genuine connection. He becomes isolated because he can no longer relate to the people around him. His friends at Moe's Tavern find him pretentious and boring. His family struggles to connect with this new version of Homer who speaks over their heads and has interests they cannot share. The episode reaches its emotional climax when Lisa finds Homer sitting alone at night, contemplating his isolation. He tells her that being smart has made him aware of how much is wrong with the world and with his life, and that awareness is painful. Lisa, who has always valued intelligence above almost everything else, is confused by his unhappiness. She assumes that being smart is always better than being ignorant. But Homer explains that intelligence comes with costs she has not fully recognized yet because she is still young. He can see things now that he wishes he could not see. He understands dynamics and patterns that were invisible when the crayon dulled his perceptions. The clarity is agonizing. Homer makes the decision to have the crayon reinserted into his brain. He finds a veterinarian willing to perform the procedure. Lisa tries to stop him, believing that choosing ignorance over intelligence is wrong and that Homer is making a terrible mistake. She writes him a letter explaining why he should stay intelligent, but Homer has the surgery before reading it. The crayon goes back into his brain. His IQ drops immediately. He returns to being the Homer everyone knows, stupid and happy, unable to see the problems that tortured his intelligent self. The episode ends with Homer finding Lisa's letter but being too stupid now to understand most of the words. He misreads it as saying that she loves him just the way he is, and he is content. This episode establishes several crucial facts. First, Homer is not naturally stupid. His cognitive impairment is the result of physical brain damage from an object lodged in his skull. Second, when that damage is removed, Homer becomes genuinely intelligent, not just slightly less dumb, but actually smart enough to see and understand complex issues. Third, Homer finds intelligence so unbearable that he chooses to damage his brain again, rather than live with full awareness. Fourth, this choice is presented as understandable rather than purely tragic. The episode suggests that Homer might actually be making a rational decision by choosing happiness through ignorance over misery through awareness. The theory extends beyond just Homer by examining the intelligence levels of other family members. Lisa Simpson is canonically established as a genius. She consistently earns perfect grades despite attending a terrible school with incompetent teachers. She plays saxophone at an advanced level. She engages with complex political and philosophical ideas. She teaches herself multiple subjects beyond what her curriculum covers. She regularly displays knowledge and reasoning ability far beyond what would be expected for an 8-year-old child. Her intelligence is not subtle or debatable. It is a fundamental aspect of her character that appears in nearly every episode. Maggie, despite being a baby who does not speak, shows repeated signs of exceptional intelligence. She has spelled her name with blocks. She has demonstrated problem-solving abilities that infants should not possess. She saved her father's life in one episode by using a rifle to shoot a criminal, showing both the motor skills and the situational awareness to understand what was happening and how to respond. In several episodes, Maggie's thoughts are shown through visual representations, and they reveal a baby who understands far more than anyone realizes. She processes complex social dynamics and thinks in ways that suggest advanced cognitive development. Despite her inability to communicate verbally, Marge's intelligence is less obvious but still present in the show's canon. She has demonstrated artistic talent, creating paintings and sculptures that show genuine skill. She has run successful, small businesses and shown herself capable of learning new skills quickly when motivated. She occasionally displays political awareness and moral reasoning that goes beyond simple rule following. Her intelligence may be less emphasized than Lisa's, or less dramatic than Homer's temporary genius phase, but the show has established that she is smarter than she often appears. Bart represents the most complex case in the family's intelligence pattern. On the surface, Bart appears to be a poor student who struggles academically and causes trouble because he lacks the intelligence to succeed in school, but numerous episodes have shown that Bart is actually quite intelligent and deliberately chooses to underperform. He scored exceptionally high on a standardized test in one episode, shocking everyone, including himself. He has demonstrated strategic thinking and planning ability when executing pranks or schemes. He learns complex skills quickly when something interests him. He shows emotional intelligence and understanding of social dynamics that allows him to manipulate situations to his advantage. The key to understanding Bart is recognizing that he has chosen to be seen as stupid and rebellious rather than smart and conforming. In one episode, Bart is placed in a class for gifted students and thrives there, showing that he is capable of academic excellence when in the right environment. But he ultimately rejects that path because being smart makes him different from his friends and isolates him socially. Bart has learned, possibly from observing Homer, that being perceived as dumb and fun is better for social acceptance than being perceived as smart and separate. He actively sabotages his own academic performance to maintain his identity as a troublemaker rather than a genius. The theory suggests that this pattern of choosing ignorance over intelligence is specifically a trait of Simpson men. Homer had a crayon in his brain but chose to put it back. Bart is capable of academic excellence but chooses to underperform and be seen as dumb. The pattern suggests that male members of the Simpson family recognize that intelligence creates social problems and consciously or unconsciously decide that stupidity is the better strategy for happiness and acceptance. Meanwhile, Lisa and Maggie, the female members of the family, embrace their intelligence despite the social costs. Lisa is often lonely and struggles to connect with peers, but she refuses to dumb herself down. Maggie cannot speak, so her intelligence remains hidden, but she has not chosen to suppress it. This creates a disturbing gender divide within the family. The women are smart and suffer social isolation because of it. The men are potentially just as smart but choose brain damage and willful ignorance to avoid that isolation. Homer literally had his brain damaged to maintain stupidity. Bart figuratively damages his own potential by refusing to engage with learning and deliberately cultivating a reputation for being dumb. Both have looked at intelligence and decided it is not worth the cost. The theory reframes Homer's entire character as tragic rather than simply comedic. Every stupid decision he makes, every time he fails to understand something obvious, every moment of incompetence is not natural inability, but the result of his choice to keep a crayon in his brain. Somewhere underneath the damage, there is a smart person who could write eloquent critiques of power plant safety violations and appreciate fine art. But that person has been deliberately suppressed because he could not handle the awareness of how empty and problematic his life actually is. Homer is not a lovable idiot. He is a man who has lobotomized himself to maintain the illusion of contentment. Bart's trajectory becomes even more disturbing when viewed as a conscious choice to follow his father's path. Bart sees that Lisa is smart and lonely while Homer is dumb and has friends. He observes that intelligence creates problems and stupidity creates acceptance. So he makes the choice, probably unconsciously at first but increasingly deliberately as he gets older, to be like Homer rather than like Lisa. He is slowly damaging his own potential the way Homer damaged his brain. Instead of using a crayon, Bart uses willful disengagement from learning, cultivation of a troublemaker identity, and active rejection of anything that might make him appear smart or different from his peers. The show has established in multiple episodes that Bart could be academically successful if he chose to be, but he has internalized the lesson that success in school means becoming like Lisa, and being like Lisa means being isolated and weird. Bart would rather be popular and dumb than intelligent and alone. He has made the same calculation Homer made, just earlier in life and without the need for actual brain damage, because Bart is accomplishing the same effect through behavioral choices. This interpretation transforms every instance of Homer's stupidity into something heartbreaking. When Homer says something idiotic or fails to grasp a simple concept, he is not showing natural limitation. He is showing the effects of his choice to remain damaged. The crayon in his brain is not an accident or a quirk. It is a suicide of the mind, a deliberate killing of his own potential because that potential came with too much pain. Every moment of bumbling incompetence is a moment where the intelligent Homer that could have been is being actively suppressed by the crayon Homer chose to keep. The Homer episode itself becomes more disturbing when you realize it is not a one-time story, but potentially a recurring pattern. Homer had the crayon removed and then put back in, but what if this is not the first time he has done this? What if every few years, Homer gets the crayon removed, experiences a brief period of intelligence and misery, and then has it reinserted? The episode presents it as a one-time event, but nothing prevents it from being cyclical. Homer might be trapped in a pattern of briefly becoming smart, hating it, and choosing stupidity again, over and over throughout his adult life. Even more disturbing is the possibility that Homer is not unique among Simpson men. His father, Abraham Simpson, is portrayed as senile and confused in his old age. But what if Abe was also intelligent once and made the same choice Homer made? What if every generation of Simpson men discovers that intelligence is painful and chooses some form of self-inflicted cognitive damage to escape that pain? The family curse is not stupidity, but the knowledge that intelligence hurts, passed down from father to son along with the choice to destroy their own minds rather than live with full awareness. Lisa represents the family member who refuses to make that choice despite experiencing the consequences daily. She is lonely. She struggles to connect with peers who do not share her intellectual interests. She is often frustrated by being surrounded by people less intelligent than herself. She experiences exactly the isolation that drove Homer to reinsert the crayon. But Lisa does not choose ignorance. She embraces her intelligence even though it makes her life harder. She suffers the social cost because she values truth and knowledge more than she values easy acceptance. The show has depicted Lisa's struggles with her intelligence across many episodes. She has been excluded from social groups because she is too smart. She has been bored in school because the curriculum cannot challenge her. She has felt different and separate from almost everyone around her. She knows what intelligence costs, but unlike Homer and Bart, she is unwilling to pay the price of stupidity to gain social comfort. This makes her both stronger and more vulnerable than the men in her family. She is stronger because she refuses to surrender her potential. She is more vulnerable because she lives with the full weight of awareness that they have chosen to escape. The theory suggests that the Simpson family contains a fundamental tragedy playing out across generations. The family genetics produce exceptional intelligence, but that intelligence comes with awareness of how flawed the world is, how empty most relationships are, how meaningless most work is, how much suffering exists that cannot be fixed. For some family members like Lisa, that awareness is worth bearing because knowledge has value in itself. For others, like Homer and Bart, the awareness is too painful, and they choose various forms of brain damage or willful ignorance to escape it. The show occasionally hints at this pattern without making it explicit. There are episodes where Homer briefly shows flashes of intelligence before reverting to stupidity. There are moments where Bart demonstrates skills or knowledge that shock everyone before he deliberately fumbles and plays dumb again. These flashes could be interpreted as the real intelligence underneath the damage or the chosen ignorance, briefly breaking through before being suppressed again. The nuclear power plant setting takes on additional meaning in this interpretation. Homer works in a facility that requires attention to detail and understanding of complex systems. A truly stupid person could not do that job even as badly as Homer does it. The fact that Homer maintains employment at a nuclear facility despite his apparent incompetence suggests he has just enough functional intelligence to avoid getting fired, which is exactly what you would expect from someone who has dulled their intelligence to a specific level rather than being naturally limited. He is smart enough to keep his job, but dumb enough to not fully understand how dangerous and morally compromised that job is. The crayon itself is a powerful symbol. It is a children's toy, something associated with innocence and simple creativity. By lodging a crayon in his brain, Homer has trapped himself in a permanent state of childlike simplicity. He cannot fully grow up or engage with adult complexity because he has literally and symbolically chosen to keep childhood innocence embedded in his mind. The crayon represents a refusal to fully mature into adult awareness, with all the pain that maturity brings. Homer's relationship with alcohol also fits this pattern. He drinks heavily and consistently throughout the series. Alcohol is a form of cognitive impairment, a chemical way to dull awareness and reduce intelligence temporarily. Even without the crayon, Homer would likely drink to achieve similar effects. He is someone who has chosen multiple methods of reducing his own cognitive function because he finds full awareness unbearable. The crayon provides baseline stupidity, and alcohol provides additional dulling when even that baseline allows too much painful thought. Bart's rebellious behavior serves a similar function. By constantly getting into trouble and being punished, Bart ensures he stays in environments where he will not be intellectually challenged. Detention, suspension, and remedial classes keep him away from situations where he might accidentally display his intelligence. His reputation as a troublemaker provides cover for any flashes of brilliance by framing them as accidents or lucky guesses, rather than evidence of his true abilities. He has constructed an entire identity designed to hide and suppress his intelligence. The disturbing power of this theory comes from how it transforms the show's comedy into tragedy. Every joke about Homer's stupidity becomes a reminder of his choice to destroy his own potential. Every instance of Bart failing in school becomes evidence of his deliberate self-sabotage. Every moment of Lisa's loneliness becomes proof that the smart members of the family are right to fear intelligence because it does lead to isolation. The laughter generated by the family's dysfunction is covering a deeper story about people who cannot handle the weight of being fully aware and conscious in a world that rewards ignorance. The theory also raises questions about free will and responsibility. If Homer and Bart are choosing stupidity, are they responsible for the harm that stupidity causes? Homer's incompetence at the power plant potentially endangers the entire town. His poor parenting damages his children. His stupidity creates problems for everyone around him. But if that stupidity is chosen rather than natural, does it make him more culpable or less? Is choosing to damage your own brain a form of suicide that should be prevented? Or is it a legitimate choice about how to manage unbearable awareness? Bart's situation is even more ethically complex because he is a child making decisions that will affect his entire life. He is choosing to underperform academically at an age when he cannot fully understand the long-term consequences of that choice. He is closing off future possibilities because he values present social acceptance over future opportunities. Adults in his life should probably intervene and force him to engage with his education, but they cannot see that he is making a choice because they believe he is naturally limited. They treat him as stupid rather than recognizing that he is performing stupidity to avoid being smart. The theory cannot be definitively proven, but is strongly supported by canonical evidence. The HOMR episode establishes that Homer has literally chosen brain damage over intelligence. Lisa's canonical genius establishes that Simpson genetics can produce exceptional intelligence. Bart's occasional displays of competence followed by deliberate failure establish that he is capable of more than he shows. Maggie's hidden intelligence establishes that even the youngest family member is smarter than she appears. The pattern across the family supports the interpretation that they are all intelligent, but some have chosen to suppress or damage that intelligence. Fun! Communities have discussed this theory extensively, particularly on Reddit, where users catalog every instance of hidden intelligence in the family. The theory appears in Ranker's collections of dark Simpsons interpretations. It resonates with viewers because it explains patterns in the show while adding psychological depth to characters who might otherwise seem one-dimensional. Homer is not just a fool. He is someone who has chosen foolishness over the alternative. Bart is not just a troublemaker. He is someone actively running away from his own potential. The theory transforms The Simpsons from a show about a dysfunctional but lovable family into a show about people trapped in patterns of self-destruction that they barely recognize. Homer sits in his living room every night with a crayon in his brain, deliberately maintaining the damage that keeps him from seeing how empty his life is. Bart sits in detention every day, deliberately failing to learn anything that might make him smart. Like his sister, Lisa sits alone with her saxophone, paying the price for refusing to join her father and brother in chosen ignorance. Maggie watches it all from her crib, too young to speak but old enough to understand that being smart in this family means being isolated, and maybe she will make the same choice they made when her time comes. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory that Homer's worsening stupidity is the result of cumulative brain damage. There exists a fan theory about The Simpsons that transforms Homer's character evolution from simple writing inconsistency into a medical horror story. According to this theory, Homer Simpson is not just a static cartoon character who happens to be stupid. He is suffering from progressive brain damage caused by decades of accumulated head trauma, chronic alcohol abuse, and constant exposure to radiation at the nuclear power plant where he works. The Homer viewers see in early seasons is noticeably more intelligent and emotionally aware than the Homer in later seasons. And this decline is not just flanderization or writers exaggerating his traits for comedy. It is the realistic depiction of a man whose brain is slowly deteriorating from injuries and toxins that have never been properly treated. Every time Homer gets hit in the head, every shift he works handling radioactive materials without proper safety equipment, every night he drinks himself into a stupor at Moe's Tavern, his brain suffers damage that accumulates over time until he can barely function as a competent adult. The canonical foundation for this theory comes from multiple episodes that explicitly establish Homer's brain has been subjected to severe and repeated trauma. The most direct evidence appears in the season 8 episode The Homer They Fall, where Homer briefly becomes a professional boxer. Before his first fight, a doctor examines Homer and discovers something unusual about his skull structure. Homer has an abnormally thick layer of fluid surrounding his brain that acts as natural cushioning. This fluid layer allows him to absorb punches to the head that would knock out or seriously injure a normal person. The doctor explains that Homer can take extraordinary amounts of cranial punishment because of this anatomical quirk. This revelation is presented as an advantage in the context of the boxing episode, but the implications are deeply disturbing. The thick fluid around Homer's brain means he can sustain repeated head trauma without immediate knockout or visible injury. But that does not mean the trauma causes no damage. It simply means Homer can take more hits before the damage becomes obvious. Every punch he absorbs in the boxing ring, every time he falls downstairs, every object that strikes his head throughout the series is still causing cumulative harm to his brain tissue. The fluid cushioning prevents instant catastrophic injury but cannot prevent the long-term effects of repeated concussions and trauma. Medical science has established through studying athletes in contact sports that repeated head impacts cause chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, even when individual hits do not result in diagnosed concussions. Football players, boxers, and hockey players who take thousands of subconcussive blows to the head over their careers develop progressive brain degeneration that leads to memory loss, personality changes, difficulty with reasoning and planning, and eventually dementia. Homer's thick skull fluid means he has been taking these kinds of hits his entire life without recognizing the danger because he does not get knocked unconscious the way a normal person would. He is the perfect candidate for developing severe CTE because his brain's natural protection allows him to sustain far more total trauma than most people could survive. The show depicts Homer being struck in the head with extraordinary frequency across its entire run. He falls off roofs, gets hit with objects, crashes vehicles into walls, and experiences impacts that would hospitalize normal people. In early seasons, these incidents are played for slapstick comedy with Homer recovering quickly and continuing his day. But as the series progresses, Homer's baseline cognitive function declines noticeably. He becomes less capable of basic reasoning. His emotional regulation deteriorates. His memory becomes increasingly unreliable. These changes could be interpreted as writers exaggerating his character traits over time, but they could also be interpreted as realistic depiction of what happens to someone who sustains constant head trauma without treatment across decades. The crayon lodged in Homer's brain from the episode Homer adds another layer to his cognitive impairment. That episode establishes that Homer has had a foreign object pressing against his frontal lobe since childhood, causing permanent damage to the part of his brain responsible for planning, impulse control, and complex thinking. But even after the crayon is removed and reinserted, Homer continues to decline cognitively across subsequent seasons. This suggests that the crayon is not his only neurological problem. It may have been the original source of his impairment, but the accumulated head trauma and other damage have created additional problems that exist independently of the crayon. Homer is not just impaired by one childhood injury, he is suffering from multiple overlapping sources of brain damage that interact to create worsening dysfunction. Homer's occupation exposes him to another source of potential brain damage that the show depicts constantly, but treats as comedy rather than serious medical concern. He works as a safety inspector at a nuclear power plant, despite having no qualifications and showing no understanding of nuclear safety protocols. The show repeatedly depicts Homer handling radioactive materials without proper protective equipment. Glowing green rods of plutonium appear near him constantly. He has been contaminated with radioactive substances multiple times. In one episode, a rod of plutonium falls down his shirt and he drives home with it before noticing. Radiation exposure at high enough doses can cause brain damage. It kills cells and damages DNA throughout the body, including in the brain. The specific type of radiation Homer is exposed to at the plant is not clearly defined, but the visual language of glowing green materials suggests gamma radiation or other forms that can penetrate tissue and cause cellular damage. If Homer has been working at the plant for over 20 years with the kind of casual disregard for safety the show depicts, his brain has almost certainly been exposed to radiation doses that would contribute to cognitive decline. The effects would be cumulative, adding to the damage from head trauma and creating a compounding situation where multiple sources of injury work together to degrade his mental function. Homer's alcohol consumption represents yet another source of ongoing brain damage. He drinks heavily and consistently throughout the series. Most evenings he is shown at Moe's Tavern consuming multiple beers. He drinks at home regularly. He has been depicted as heavily intoxicated countless times. Chronic alcohol abuse is medically established to cause brain damage through multiple mechanisms. Alcohol kills brain cells directly. It causes vitamin deficiencies that lead to neurological problems. It contributes to liver disease, which prevents the body from filtering toxins from the blood, allowing those toxins to damage the brain. Heavy drinkers show measurable brain shrinkage and loss of white matter that impairs cognitive function. Homer has been drinking heavily for his entire adult life. The cumulative effect of decades of alcohol abuse on top of head trauma and radiation exposure would be catastrophic for brain function. Each individual source of damage would be serious on its own. Together, they create a situation where Homer's brain is under constant assault from multiple directions, with no opportunity to heal or recover. His cognitive decline across the series run is exactly what medical science would predict for someone with his combination of risk factors. The theory becomes particularly disturbing when you examine Homer's memory problems, which become more pronounced in later seasons. One of the most frequently cited pieces of evidence is Homer's apparent inability to consistently remember that Maggie exists. In multiple episodes across different seasons, Homer seems to forget he has a third child. He counts his children and comes up with 2 instead of 3. He is reminded that Maggie exists and seems surprised. The show presents this as a running gag about Homer's general stupidity, but it could also be interpreted as evidence of serious memory impairment. Short-term memory loss and difficulty forming new long-term memories are classic symptoms of brain damage and early dementia. If Homer's brain has been damaged severely enough, he might genuinely struggle to maintain awareness of Maggie because his ability to consolidate memories has been compromised. He knows he has children named Bart and Lisa because those memories were formed before the worst of his brain damage occurred. But Maggie was born more recently, possibly after the cumulative trauma had already begun affecting his memory formation. Homer might be in a situation where he cannot reliably remember information from after a certain point in his life because his brain can no longer properly encode new long-term memories. The show has depicted Homer maintaining a wall of photographs in his home with labels identifying family members. While this is played for comedy, it is also exactly the kind of memory aid that people with early-stage dementia use to compensate for their failing recall. When you cannot reliably remember who people are or how they relate to you, having photographs with names and relationships written on them allows you to function in social situations without revealing the extent of your memory loss. Homer needing these photographs suggests he cannot trust his own memory to provide accurate information about his own family. Other memory problems appear throughout the series. Homer frequently forgets events from previous episodes. He seems unable to learn from experience or retain information from one situation to the next. He makes the same mistakes repeatedly as if he has no memory of making them before. These could be interpreted as the show resetting continuity between episodes for sitcom convenience, but they could also be interpreted as a realistic depiction of someone whose memory is so damaged that he genuinely cannot recall his own recent history. Each episode might represent Homer living in an eternal present where he has no reliable access to his own past beyond the most deeply embedded memories from before his brain damage became severe. The progression of Homer's stupidity across the series' timeline supports the brain damage theory. In early seasons, Homer is foolish and impulsive but shows basic competence and occasional flashes of genuine intelligence. He can hold conversations that demonstrate understanding of complex topics. He shows emotional depth and capacity for growth. He makes mistakes but learns from them within episodes. His stupidity is present but bounded within realistic limits for someone with below-average intelligence but normal brain function. As seasons progress, Homer becomes progressively less competent. His emotional range narrows. His ability to understand basic concepts deteriorates. He cannot follow simple logic or remember straightforward information. His personality becomes more childlike and less capable of adult reasoning. The change is gradual across hundreds of episodes, but when you compare early Homer to later Homer, the decline in cognitive function is stark and undeniable. This gradual worsening is exactly what you would expect from progressive brain damage rather than static character traits. The show occasionally acknowledges that something is wrong with Homer's brain beyond just natural stupidity. In addition to the crayon episode, there are references to Homer having suffered brain damage from various incidents. X-rays of his skull have shown abnormalities. Medical professionals have expressed concern about his neurological state, but these acknowledgments are always played for comedy and never lead to serious medical intervention or ongoing treatment. Homer continues working, drinking, and sustaining injuries without anyone in his life treating his obvious cognitive decline as a medical emergency that requires immediate attention. This lack of intervention is itself disturbing. Marge watches her husband become progressively less capable across years of their marriage, but does not push for neurological evaluation or treatment. His children grow up watching their father deteriorate mentally, but accept it as normal. His co-workers at the nuclear plant, where he holds a position that requires competence to prevent catastrophic accidents, do not report his obvious impairment to authorities. His friends continue enabling his drinking and treating his memory problems as jokes rather than symptoms. The entire community around Homer has normalized his cognitive decline to the point where nobody recognizes or addresses it as the medical crisis it actually represents. The social implications of Homer's brain damage extend beyond just his own suffering. A man with severe cognitive impairment is working at a nuclear power plant where his mistakes could kill thousands of people. He is driving a car regularly despite having reaction times and judgment compromised by brain damage. He is raising children while unable to consistently remember he has 3 of them. He is making important family decisions despite lacking the cognitive capacity to understand the consequences of those decisions. Homer's brain damage is not just a personal tragedy, it is a public safety threat that affects everyone around him. The show has depicted multiple incidents where Homer's incompetence at the power plant nearly causes disaster. He has come close to causing meltdowns, radiation leaks, and other catastrophic failures. These incidents are presented as comedy, but if Homer is genuinely suffering from progressive brain damage that impairs his judgment and memory, then every day he goes to work is a day when Springfield is at risk of nuclear catastrophe because a mentally impaired man is responsible for safety at a nuclear facility. The fact that Mr. Burns keeps him employed despite his obvious incompetence suggests that Burns either does not recognize how damaged Homer is or does not care because Homer is too impaired to recognize safety violations and report them to authorities. Homer's home life becomes tragic when viewed through the lens of his deteriorating brain. He loves his family but becomes less capable over time of expressing that love appropriately or maintaining healthy relationships. Marge has to manage more and more of the household responsibilities as Homer becomes less reliable. The children learn they cannot depend on their father for consistent support or guidance. Bart grows up with a role model whose brain damage manifests as childish behavior, teaching Bart that immaturity and stupidity are acceptable ways to be a man. Lisa grows up frustrated by her father's inability to understand her or engage with her intellectually, creating distance between them that likely contributes to her loneliness and sense of not belonging in her own family. The boxing episode that reveals Homer's thick skull fluid also shows him taking tremendous damage during his brief career as a fighter. He wins fights not by skill but by absorbing punishment until his opponents exhaust themselves hitting him. Every punch he takes is adding to his cumulative brain trauma. The episode ends with Homer retiring from boxing before fighting a final opponent who would likely kill him, but the damage from the fights he already had is permanent. Those fights probably accelerated his cognitive decline significantly. The episode aired in 1997, which is around the time when many fans note Homer's character beginning to shift toward more extreme stupidity. The timing suggests that the boxing career could be treated as a turning point, where Homer's brain damage crossed a threshold into more serious impairment. Homer's relationship with alcohol takes on additional darkness when understood as self-medication for the symptoms of brain damage. People with traumatic brain injury often experience depression, anxiety, and emotional dysregulation. Alcohol provides temporary relief from these symptoms, even as it worsens the underlying damage. Homer might be drinking partly because his damaged brain creates emotional states that he cannot manage through normal coping mechanisms. He drinks to feel normal, but the drinking damages his brain further, creating a cycle where the treatment worsens the condition it is supposedly treating. He is trapped in a downward spiral where brain damage drives drinking, which causes more brain damage, which drives more drinking. The show has depicted Homer experiencing symptoms consistent with traumatic brain injury beyond just stupidity and memory loss. He has mood swings and emotional outbursts. He shows poor impulse control. He has difficulty with executive function and planning. He sometimes appears confused about where he is or what he is doing. He has coordination problems beyond just cartoon clumsiness. All of these symptoms align with what medical professionals see in patients with moderate to severe brain damage. Homer is not just a cartoon character who happens to be dumb. He is showing a realistic symptom profile of someone with multiple brain injuries and ongoing neurotoxic exposure. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that Homer seems unaware of his own decline. He does not recognize that he is becoming less capable over time. He cannot remember being smarter or more competent because his damaged memory cannot reliably access his own past. He lives in an eternal present where his current level of impairment seems normal to him because he has no clear recollection of ever being different. Only people who have known him for years can see the change, and they have accepted it as just how Homer is now, rather than recognizing it as progressive brain damage that requires intervention. The show occasionally features flashback episodes showing Homer at different points in his past, and these flashbacks sometimes show him as more capable and intelligent than he is in present-day episodes. While this could be explained as the writers being inconsistent about his characterization, it could also be evidence that Homer genuinely was smarter in the past and has declined over time. The flashbacks show what he was like before decades of accumulated damage took their toll. They provide a baseline against which his current state can be measured, and the measurement reveals dramatic cognitive decline. Medical professionals who have examined Homer in various episodes sometimes express surprise or concern about the state of his brain. These reactions suggest that even by cartoon standards, something is seriously wrong with Homer's neurological function. But their concerns never translate into sustained treatment or lifestyle changes that might slow his decline. Homer continues all the behaviors that are damaging his brain. He continues working at the nuclear plant. He continues drinking heavily. He continues taking blows to the head in various slapstick accidents. Nobody intervenes to stop the sources of damage because nobody treats his condition as serious or progressive. The crayon episode becomes even more tragic when considered alongside the cumulative damage theory. Homer has the crayon removed and briefly experiences what it is like to have full cognitive function. But even without the crayon, he still has all the other sources of brain damage. The head trauma, the radiation exposure, the alcohol damage are all still present. Removing the crayon gives him a glimpse of what he could have been if he only had that one injury, but it cannot restore him to full health because there are too many other problems. He chooses to have the crayon reinserted partly because intelligence makes him miserable, but also possibly because even without the crayon, he cannot maintain that level of function for long. The other damage is too severe. The theory transforms every slapstick accident in The Simpsons into something much darker. When Homer falls off a roof or gets hit with a falling object or crashes his car into something, it is not just a cartoon gag. It is another incident of traumatic brain injury added to a lifetime of such incidents. The comedy comes from Homer surviving and walking away, but the reality would be that each incident adds to cumulative damage that is slowly destroying his ability to think, remember, and function. The show is depicting a man in the late stages of chronic traumatic encephalopathy while playing it for laughs, because the audience does not understand they are watching someone's brain deteriorate in real time across decades. Online communities have discussed this theory extensively, particularly on Reddit, where users catalog evidence of Homer's declining intelligence and increasing memory problems. TV Tropes has wiki pages dedicated to analyzing Homer's cognitive state and whether his stupidity could be explained by actual medical conditions. Bored Panda and CBR have both published articles about fan theories suggesting Homer has serious memory and neurological problems. The theory has gained enough traction that it represents a significant way that fans reconcile the difference between early Homer and later Homer without simply dismissing it as bad writing. The theory also explains why Homer's family seems to have given up on expecting him to improve or change. When you understand someone's behavior as resulting from permanent brain damage rather than choices or personality, you stop expecting them to be different. Marge knows Homer is never going to become more responsible or intelligent because his brain is physically incapable of supporting those improvements. The children know their father is limited in ways that will never change. The family has adapted to living with someone who is cognitively impaired and probably getting worse over time. They have lowered their expectations and learned to work around his limitations because they recognize, consciously or not, that he cannot be fixed. The most disturbing aspect of the theory is how it reframes decades of comedy as documentation of untreated traumatic brain injury. Every joke about Homer being stupid is a joke about someone with permanent neurological damage. Every gag where he forgets something important is depicting a symptom of brain trauma. Every slapstick accident where he gets hit in the head is showing the mechanism by which his condition is getting worse. The audience laughs at a man whose brain is being destroyed and who lacks the cognitive capacity to recognize what is happening to him or seek help. The comedy is built on the suffering of someone who is disabled and deteriorating and completely unable to advocate for himself or change his situation. Homer Simpson sits in his living room every night with a crayon in his brain, a skull full of accumulated trauma, tissues saturated with radiation damage, and neurons dying from decades of alcohol abuse. He cannot reliably remember all his children. He cannot perform his job competently. He cannot maintain relationships without constant forgiveness from people who have accepted that he will never be better than he is right now. He is getting worse every day. Every injury adding to damage that will never heal. Every drink killing cells that will never regenerate. Every shift at the plant exposing him to radiation that will continue destroying his brain until he dies. And everyone around him treats it as normal, as just how Homer is, never recognizing or addressing the medical emergency that is his existence. He is a man with severe untreated brain damage living in a community that has decided his impairment is funny rather than tragic, and he will continue declining until his damaged brain can no longer keep his body alive. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.